Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this virtual Housing and Communities Committee for the 24th of January 2021. As I said, virtual again, but hopefully that may change next time around. Who knows? As we are virtual, I'll remind you again, if you could keep your microphones on mute, please, unless you're asked to speak. That would help with any feedback. So first of all, can I ask Mr. Taylor, do we have any apologies or any substitutions today?
Yeah, thanks, convener. We've got apologies this morning from Councillors McCall and Councillor Shires. Councillor McCall is substituted by Councillor Lang and Councillor Shires substituted by Councillor Duff.
Thank you very much. And I take it we've got no tenants representatives today?
We don't know.
Fine. Okay, thank you very much. So without further ado, if I may, I will introduce the virtual top table. If I may, Councillor Chris Ahern, Vice Convener, Mrs. Barbara Renton, Executive Director Communities, Mrs. Claire Mailer, Deputy Director Communities, Scott Hendry, Team Leader for Committee Services, and as you've heard, Adam Taylor, also for Committee Services, are on the virtual top table. As we're on virtual, we'll adopt the usual system. If you can want to ask a question, if you can put Q in the chat box, C comment, that will allow me to call you in when we're ready. If I can now, Mr. Taylor, we'll have a roll call to make sure everyone's in.
Yeah, no problem. Councillors, when I call your name, if you can just indicate whether you're present in the meeting. Councillor Ahern.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Present.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Present.
Convener, we know you're here, so I'll just skip past you. Councillor Jarvis.
Here.
Councillor Massey.
Present.
Councillor Lang.
Present.
Councillor McEwen.
Present.
Councillor Duff.
Present.
Councillor Smith.
Present.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
And Councillor Waters.
Present.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. So if I may now ask members, do we have any declarations of interest today, please? If you can put DI in the box. Councillor Ahern, DI, thank you very much. I'll hang on for just a second if there's any more.
The declaration of interest on paper 9 as the chair of the Community Justice Partnership and the signatory to the report was in the papers.
Thank you very much. There's none other come through, so go on to the next item, which is, can we agree the previous minute for the meeting of the 10th of November 2021? In the absence of any comment, I'll assume fine. Okay, thank you very much. I'll assume we're all agreed. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, we now get to the next report, and I'll, as usual, hand over to the Vice Convener, who will lead on the next items. Thank you, Vice Convener.
Thank you very much, Convener. Yes, item 4 is the police and fire scrutiny papers. The paper 1 is the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service interim activity report, and I'll ask Ewan Baird if he could introduce the report.
Good morning, everybody, and I hope you're all well. Hopefully you've had time to have a look through the report. It's as you heard, it's an interim report, so it's a little more briefer than our usual full quarterly reports. You'll see from the pack that the report covers the activities during December, and the full Q3 report will go into this in more detail. On page 15 of your pack, you'll see the performance summary is largely positive. Accidental dwelling fires is the lowest December figure for the last 3 years, which is very positive for our area. This low number reflects accidental dwelling fire casualties, of which there were none. RTCs, road traffic collisions, is close to our average. However, it's positively below that number. And the increase in RTC casualties that you'll see is a slight inaccuracy indicated as 8, as this was the total number of initial medical assessments that were carried out on scene. The actual amount of casualties that received injuries was actually 3, but this will be covered in the Q3 report in more detail. Unwanted fire alarm signals, again, close to our average figure. However, we can also see we've got positive figures in relation to our primary and secondary fires, which were all indicating very low numbers. On page 17 and 18 of your pack, you'll see the community safety initiatives and activities that we've been involved in. Again, COVID has impacted us on a lot of these activities, but we are engaging a lot with our partners, with their online platforms, also sharing their information also. And you also see an image of the protracted road traffic collision that we're involved in on the A85 just outside Medwin. So that gives us an overview of the report. I'd be happy to take any questions in relation to the report or anything that's been happening in the area during that period.
Thank you very much, Ewan. Yes, we'll open up to questions if anybody's got a question based on the interim report. I'd like to put a Q in the chat. Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Yeah, it's really on the second part. It's things happening in the area that you might want to comment on. Obviously, welcome the report and the direction of travel within it. It's regarding Aberfeld or Bredalbin High School, and I'll be raising the fact that with the Education Department, there seems to have been claims of about 8 false alarms up there recently, and at least 2 this year on successive days while the children are doing prelims. But the parents are concerned that because I think, and you'll be able to update us, difficulties recruiting retained fire service personnel in some of the rural areas, that appliances are sent from Perth or Blairgowrie and can take up to an hour. And I find that maybe concerning when we have examples of recent school fires, example in Peebles. So I was just looking for a comment on how you see around this, or how you will be trying to combat recruitment in rural areas.
Thanks for your question. We've currently got an inquiry ongoing from MSP onto this, within this situation at Bredalbin. The 8 false alarms, I believe, weren't all due to malicious. There were some accidental, the fire alarm operating whilst it was getting tested, etc. But you're right in what we're saying. What we've been looking at on Friday was our mobilisation to that area. As you're probably aware, we do have recruitment issues at Dunkeld, Pitlochry, Aberfeldy, and our establishment figures are low. And if these all coincide when we've got a call to a school within that area, yes, our next nearest available appliances will attend, for instance, from Perth or Blairgowrie, which can take up to about 35 minutes, I believe, to actually attend that area. It isn't without the work that we're doing. We're doing as much as we actually can. We've done open days. We have been advertising in almost every place we can to actually get retained firefighters to join these areas. We've got quite positive results. The fact that we've got 24 people who are actually in our work stream to get recruited within Perth and Ross retained stations. So that's going to be happening in the next year, and that will boost the numbers. But Perth and Ross isn't in isolation here. This is represented across Scotland, particularly up in the Highlands, with retention and recruitment of retained and volunteer personnel. But it's not without the work that we're trying to do to boost these numbers.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett. Sorry, Councillor Lane, do you?
Sorry, it was just a comment. Yeah, I understand it's definitely not the fire service's problem. It's probably more related to housing and lack of affordable housing in these areas, with short-term lets and that making it more difficult for young families or families of working age to live in the area. So I appreciate this happening in rural areas all over Scotland. But I'm glad to hear what the action you are taking, and so thanks for the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I think firstly I'd like to say that this is an excellent report, and if you look at all the indicators that are highlighted, they're all moving in a positive direction, or if they're sitting at zero, then they're staying at zero, and the only fly in the ointment was with regard to non-fatal road traffic collisions, which we've been advised is a reporting error. So I'd like to commend the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service on this performance, but also if they could just explain a little bit further with regard to the on-site assessment of injuries, just for our own clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. The on-site assessment of injuries, whenever we attend a road traffic collision, unless they're physically able to remove themselves from their car and essentially self-rescue themselves, if they're actually within the vehicle, we will do an initial assessment. This initial assessment is captured on our online reporting tool that contributes to all the statistics right back to the Scottish Government. So whenever we draw these statistics off, the fact it was a December report rather than a quarterly report, these figures have highlighted the initial assessment as opposed to casualties that received injuries that would be assessed by either the Scottish Ambulance Service or transported to a hospital.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Thank you. Next question is Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. I want to dig a little bit deeper into some of the difficulties of recruiting. I was at Dunkeld and Burnham Community Council when one of your colleagues came along to talk about that. So I just wanted to know, how much of a problem is the fact that there is a lack of affordable housing, to your recruitment drives?
I would say it was morely the areas that have been impacted with affordable housing would be Dunkeld and Auchterarder. We've seen an increasing number of people, particularly when Dunkeld, serving firefighters that have either moved to Blairgowrie, and we've recently had one moving to Pitlochry. Only positive side with the ones moving to Pitlochry is we had low numbers there anyway. So yeah, it's the difficulty. We've got a number of long-serving firefighters at Dunkeld who are coming up for their retirement, particularly the watch commander, who's done a commendable 42 years, will be retiring in February. So it's just the replacement of these individuals. We just find it increasingly challenging. We've undertaken an open day at Dunkeld. We're going to be increasing the signage at the end of the road and putting our recruitment information on. And as I say, we're looking to any assistance where possible, particularly in those areas going up and down the A9 corridor, where we can increase in awareness and get people who are interested in becoming retained firefighters.
Yes, but I mean, if there's no accommodation vacant for them, because I assume that the long-serving officers who retire will not be giving up their homes. So I mean, that will be adding to your problems considerably.
It is, and it's a reflection across Scotland in many areas, particularly up in the Highlands, along where the North Coast 500 is. A lot of houses up those areas are buy to let. Yes. We're seeing an increasingly challenges, and it's not just Perth and Ross, it's across Scotland. We're just doing what we can to maintain these levels as high as we can. But unfortunately, with people who work out with the area, when they book off duty, if that happens at the same time as other neighbouring stations, that is where we'll see the problems, where we've got to get the next nearest appliance, which may be 20, 30 minutes away to attend.
Okay, thank you. That's quite a problem.
Thank you very much. Councillor McEwen.
Vice Convener, my things for a comment, and I see that Councillor Massey has a question, so I was going to leave him to have his question first before I make my comment. Is that fine with yourself?
Beg your pardon, just seen that.
Yes.
Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you for the report. I've been contacted by a few residents of Tulloch with concerns about the two car fires in the last week. Can you shed any light on these fires, were they set deliberate, or have you had any findings so far?
No, sorry, I don't have any information of that at the moment. I'm sorry. I mean, they will be captured in the next report for Q4, so we'll get more information for you for that. But at the moment, I'm not aware of anything. Police Scotland maybe will give more details if there's been any suspicions around the car fires in that area.
Thank you. I may ask them when they come on then. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone else with a question. So we'll move to comments. If anybody's got a comment, put a C in the chat, and I see go back to Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. That's just a comment on the discussion we've had this morning regarding the fire services difficulty with getting short-term or getting emergency people to work in these rural areas. This is a public meeting, and we know that the press listen and report on our meetings every day, and I just hope that the press can cover a story for you to try and encourage people to come forward. Your example of your watch commander in Dunkeld is an example to our communities, an example to the benefit that people can have and the positiveness that they can contribute to the community by coming forward and performing these roles. And I just hope that people can. I think as a council we need to look at short-term lets and accommodation in these rural areas as well, and make these things easier for people to take account of these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't see any more requests for comments. Are we happy to note the report?
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you very much, Ewan.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Right, move on to item 4.2, which is the police reports. Members of the committee will remember that on the 8th of September at the last committee meeting, we had no quarterly report from the police as they were busily tied up in preparations for COP26. So today we've got the quarterly report for 1st of July to the 30th of September, as well as the interim report for this quarter. So I'll ask Chief Superintendent Phil Davison if he'd like to speak to the report, and I'll leave it up to him whether he wants to do the two together or do the quarterly report and then the interim report. Thank you very much.
Morning, Vice Convener, and thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everybody else. Really good to be here again today and to see you all, and I trust that everyone's okay and enjoyed some quality family time over the festive period. For information, I've Chief Inspector Graham Binney with me again as usual, who, as you know, is the local area commander for Perth and Kinross. We're in the same office due to some Teams issues, but you'll hopefully be able to hear us both okay as we move on this morning. In terms of the policing report, I'll give a brief overview in a second of the Q2 report, and then Chief Inspector Binney is going to have a bit of reflection of the festive period, and we'll do that before opening up to questions, if that's okay with yourself, Vice Convener. See the nod there.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of the Q2 policing report, which has clearly been shared with the papers, I'll trust that members have had the opportunity to read that, and I wouldn't intend to go over the full submission. The report covers both contextual information for the period against the national policing objectives, and also where it supports the Perth and Kinross Community Plan. It covers the reporting period 1st of July to the 30th of September. However, it does focus on year-to-date data for the corresponding period 1st of April to the 30th of September, and against that of the year before. As per the last time I was here, I would again advise members that this period that we're reporting on has comparison against a period in the previous year that had increased pandemic restrictions, and that, as we're all aware by now, clearly makes direct comparisons to the same period challenging. And as advised last time, the Q2 period that we're reporting on here does coincide with a significant easing of restrictions that were in place comparative to the same period in the year before, and that certainly through Q2 this time round has seen for increased road usage, increased social interaction, the reopening of licensed trade and wider commercial and local events activities returning, and clearly that leads to changes in reporting and connections into the police. In terms of a summary, I suppose, for this quarter, I would report that we've seen reductions in serious assaults and robberies compared to Q1. However, there have been some slight increases in common assault and vandalism. It's pleasing to see the reductions in serious assaults and a reduction in assaults on emergency service workers, as the impacts on victims of these crimes is often significant. However, we're absolutely not complacent and recognise that the increase in common assaults that's reported, where often alcohol and drugs continue to be key factors, and that domestic abuse related assaults continue to account for a high number of instances, require our absolute and clear focus. Q2 also saw an unexpected shift for us in the pattern of reported acquisitive crime, with reduced prevalence of criminals targeting less well defended places such as sheds and motor vehicles and carrying out shoplifting, and instead we saw an increased shift towards more break-ins to houses, and that clearly is an area of concern and has been an area of focused activity for us. In terms of the report, reported fraud continues to be high and remains above the comparative figures for the same period in the previous year, and that is a position that is consistent nationally, as criminals throughout the pandemic have moved increasingly into the cyberspace to commit crime during the various lockdowns and have carried that forward. And this area is often, as I've described previously, a very complicated area, an area that we have clear local officer investigation, but undoubtedly involves support from our specialist officers in our National Specialist Crime Division. In terms of road safety, tragically in the reporting period, Perth and Kinross has experienced 3 road traffic fatalities by the end of Q2, and that is a 28% increase, and also a 28% increase in serious injuries on our roads compared to the same period the year before. Now that does contrast with a reduction in slight injury collisions, but clearly this gives us cause for concern. I would assess that clearly the reduction in COVID-19 restrictions has undoubtedly seen increased road usage, where as a consequence there's been focused prioritisation on road safety. We've had some significant campaign activity which has been undertaken in this space, and that's detailed in the report. And you'll also note in the report that we've seen a corresponding increase in the detection of speeding offences, and that is evidential of the police activity in this space, clearly looking to try and influence driver behaviour and report accordingly. Recorded sexual crime has risen overall during this quarter, with 10 more crimes than in the equivalent period last year. This increase is again it's consistent with the national position and is our assessment mainly driven by the reporting of historical abuse and cyber enabled offences, and this is an area that continues to be a one that we work closely with a range of partners on to best encourage reporting, to work preventatively, and to best support victims of crime. Responding to community intelligence and clearly aware of serious and organised crime groups, in the reporting period we've continued to focus on the dangers resulting from the supply of drugs, and our proactive work has increased with 40% additional cases of drug supply noted. So again, that's positive reflection of the clear focus that policing has had, and the reporting period also accounts for increased demands from a return of the public to sporting events such as the Scottish Premier League matches, and during the period we've clearly supported the policing of a number of those events, as well as a continued experience of significant demand in the dealing with missing people and report for concern calls relating to persons with vulnerabilities. I trust, Vice Convener, that gives a bit of a flavour of some of the key aspects of the Q2 report. I would give assurances that beyond those key headlines and the activities we've got around about them, that our officers in Perth and Kinross remain absolutely focused on the right areas for the communities of Perth and Kinross. And before I hand over to Chief Inspector Binney for a brief reflection on the festive period, it's appropriate as I close my opening remarks to thank members for their support ahead of the Conference of the Parties, COP26. I think it's a reasonable assessment to say that the policing operation for that was a real success and followed significant planning towards what was one of the most complex policing operations ever in Scotland. Our officers from Perth and Kinross and wider Tayside did us proud, either representing their specialisms at the event itself or in providing the essential ongoing and high quality daily services that they provide to our local communities. I'm really proud of their efforts, and again thank members for the support during the period. So I wouldn't offer to say anything further at this stage. I know that there'll be questions. Before I open up for both Graham and I to some questions, I'll hand over briefly to Graham just to have a touch of reflection on that sort of festive period, which just bridges the gap there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davison, and thank you, Vice Convener. Briefly, it probably worth reflecting on the festive period. We traditionally have a festive policing plan which runs from the 7th of December to the 4th of January. It is largely, and has been in the past, focused on events and more footfall within particularly Perth city centre and increased usage of licensed premises around Christmas and New Year time. Understandably, that the plan did not manifest itself in traditional methods because of the increase in Omicron just at the turn of the year. So there were a number of events cancelled and impact on licensed premises and the footfall within city centres. We were, as Mr. Davison alluded to, spending a lot of time, as we do, on concern calls and missing people, which sadly were increasing over the Christmas period with added vulnerability. However, we did have our community teams, both in uniform and in plain clothes, around the city centres, focused on individuals known to them who are repeatedly committing crime within these spaces and within retail premises. The number of successes in arresting and charging repeat shoplifters, individuals who are involved in sneak-in thefts and who are in possession of drugs and are engaged in the supply of those drugs in the city centre. Because of the increase in early sitting towards the autumn of people using licensed premises and a small increase in offending we saw around these licensed premises, we have been working with the licensees to create more safer places for people within city centres, and our community policing team continue to focus on that. And it's probably worth highlighting the really positive way our licensees have reacted to COVID restrictions and the changes. We only have one licensed premises in Perth which has been on an intervention plan, so the willingness of licensees to work with the police and other partners has been commendable during this period. It's probably worth mentioning the Festive Road Safety campaign as well, which focuses on drink and drugs driving, and I would expect the proactive work in that area to lead to increased drink and drug driving detections in the next reporting period, because primarily of the number of road users who were out and about compared to the same period last year. So those are probably the highlights, Vice Convener, if there are questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Phil and Graham, for your reports. I'm getting feedback. I don't know if somebody's mic is still open. And thank you, Chief Superintendent, for your thanks for members. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the members and everybody else listening in this committee that the work you've done and the pressures you've been under, certainly for the last few years with COVID, but also with having to cope with COP26 last year. And I think there's a lot of thanks that needs to go back to yourself and all your officers in Tayside. I'll now open it to questions. And can we have the questions for the quarterly report and the interim report? And if we can keep the questions to those two items. Councillor Peter Barrett's first.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks to Chief Superintendent Phil Davison. I wanted to ask further about common assaults, and particularly the paragraph that states that worryingly almost a quarter of male perpetrators are aged between 10 and 17, which will require further commitment to working in schools and with young people. Are there specific evidence-based interventions that the police are intending to implement to address, and how does that 25% cohort compare with the rest of Scotland?
Thank you, Councillor Barrett, for the question. I'll bring in Chief Inspector Binney in a moment just to give that very local picture, but certainly for the broader Scotland piece, we tend to find that the positioning and the makeup around about assault statistics is fairly consistent across the country. And it certainly is more often than not the case that drugs and alcohol are involved, that there is often a domestic element to them. And in the vast majority of cases, the offenders are certainly male, some 72%, and that is fairly consistent across the country. And as you describe, there is the sort of worry around about younger males. There's a number of national initiatives that Tayside, like everywhere else, is heavily involved in, and that involves working closely with partners such as Mentors in Violence into schools through public campaigns around about clearly the dangers of violence and what that can lead to, but also the sort of the links in terms of drugs and alcohol and how those feature as drivers behind same. But just to give you some local context, I'll bring in Chief Inspector Binney.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I wish I had all the answers, but from a personal perspective, I'm conscious of the fact that we're seeing slightly more young people, particularly young men, involved in crime, in violent crime. We are aware as a partnership of impact on young people's mental health. I am aware, as will members of this meeting be aware of, the increased, probably anecdotal prevalence of possession and use of drugs and alcohol by young people. And we're aware of the impact of COVID on education. I had made a commitment here to try and make sure we retain resources to engage directly with our young people and directly engage with schools in particular as key partners. We did have Operation Stung in place, which continues, and probably at the last phase of that operation in terms of trying to understand how we can interact and engage better with our young people to improve their futures. And I think it probably just I would reflect that I am at a position where I need to put my foot in the ball a little bit and seek some wider assistance from partners, and my responsibility is to retain that commitment to our young people and to reach out to partners to think strategically, how do we focus on these issues a little bit more. Probably unrealistic of me to probably offer all the answers at the moment, but my commitment to our young people and to everyone else in this meeting is I intend to give some more attention and seek the assistance of partners to try and understand better these issues.
Thank you very much. I see Jackie Pepper wants to comment on that as well.
Thank you, Convener, and thanks very much, Graham, for your update. I think it might be helpful for committee to know that we have a plan to continue the youth engagement team for a further year. So that was a temporary addition to our services for young people, providing detached youth work on the streets, able to be deployed anywhere across Perth and Kinross, and we recognise the success of that in managing the situations that have arisen. And I think we've seen a shift, and Mr. Binney will probably confirm this, a shift from antisocial behaviour to other issues that we're able to pick up on. So the youth work team are engaging with young people in a very proactive and meaningful way, which means we can divert them into other activities. Or we're also looking at the addition to that team of some staff with mental health, a mental health focus, so that we can divert young people into mental health support services to support their mental health and well-being at a very early stage if they're presenting on the streets or in our parks or wherever. So I think that's a really positive contribution to the work that Mr. Binney has outlined there, and we have a plan to continue that for a further year, and just down to the sheer success of that work. So it's probably helpful that committee is aware that that's our plan.
Thank you very much.
Vice Convener, if I could just follow up on that, and I'm really grateful for Inspector Binney's commitment that he made there, and also for Jackie Pepper's contribution. Occasionally in the past, we've spoken about this committee doing deeper dives into particular issues. Now, whether we've got the time to do that between now and the new council, I'm not sure, but I would certainly appreciate a further report back on this subject specifically at the next meeting of the committee.
Okay, thank you for that, and yes, we'll try and put that on there and speak before the next committee. Councillor Bailey, followed by Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you, and thank you for both of the informative reports there, the verbal ones and the paper ones. My question is about the figures on page 25 of the overall document pack. That's the one with the quarterly changes. The number of reported frauds now exceeds the total number of the other acquisitive crimes combined. However, the detection rate for fraud is less than half of those more physical forms of acquisitive crimes. Are you, as the police, well enough resourced to provide an appropriate response to these cyber crimes? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. A really good question, and it's a one that that absolutely, I suppose, is there in the thinking for the service nationally. Fraud, by its very nature, is so complex and is often international in its being. And I think when we start looking at that national and international and the broad spectrum of it, it leads to a position where we are, as a service, investing in our cyber capabilities. There's a cyber policing strategy that's been developed nationally that is involving I guess, looking to try and get ahead of criminals in this space. And bring about additional investigative techniques and preventative and proactive measures. The most common aspect of fraud that comes in is fraudulent use of bank cards. So, whilst there's a bit about that getting the balance right in this space that we can do, I think we do quite well as it is for trying to get messages of a preventative nature out to the public. But I think that such is the scale of increased criminal activity in this area, it's an area we're needing to focus on a little bit greater, if I'm honest. And I think that stretches across the multi-agency space. So with banks, with the use of social media, etc., to get messages out around about, the protection of personal data, how to, for example, with cards and bank details, how you protect that when you're carrying it on your person. through to phishing exercises and other activities in the online space. Whilst the detection rate, and I suppose coming back to your exacting question, is relatively low at this point in time, there are a number, a vast majority of these cases that will take some time to get to the point of understanding if we can detect somebody for them. And that is because of that international and broader spread nature to them. So I think it's always an area when we look at detection rates that can often have a bit of a lag to it. And there's often a catch up from where we are now, and a typical case can take months and months in the working to establish a suspect for them. But I'm certainly content from what I am engaged in nationally, what resources I've got locally, that we recognise the significance of this area of concern for the public. We recognise the increasing trend, and that there is the application of officers and the increase of skill set locally and the increase of national capability and skill set that is rightly responding to it. So to answer your question, I think we are well placed going forward, and we'll get even better placed with the rollout of the new cyber strategy. Hope that helps response.
Great, thank you for the reassurance. It does, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Barrett, followed by Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. On page 47 or 26 of the Q2 report, there's reference to using alternatives to police attendance in cases where people require mental health interventions. I know when I was out with the police last year, it was clear that dealing with mental health issues takes up a huge amount of police time and is very frustrating for your officers. Can you let us know how that's being tackled and what impact it's having, please?
Certainly, Councillor, and thanks for the question. I'll maybe bring in Chief Inspector Binney for a bit of local context here. So we've got some really good partnership working that's been ongoing. But on the broader, I guess, national and wider Tayside position first. So I think it's been reported into this committee before, and it's certainly indicated in this report that the increasing policing activity that's in the space of missing people or vulnerability calls to persons that there are behavioural concerns around about is increasing significantly, such that at any time it's now accounting for way more than traditional police activity into the investigation of crime. But that position reflects societal challenges, and it's been absolutely an increased challenge because of the COVID period that we've faced through, and we know that mental health and the impact on mental health across all aspects of society has undoubtedly been a real issue for all. On the sort of the national basis, there is a strategic position around about how we look to a public health approach to policing, how we can increase our efforts in working across the multi-agency space to ensure that people at their point in crisis get access to the most appropriate support at the earliest opportunity, which I think is the key point here. That transcends into the Tayside position, where at my level I'm working very closely with the three local authority chief executives, the chief executive of NHS Tayside, in response to the Strang report on mental health services provision in Tayside. And we very much are looking at that action plan space as to how we collectively can improve the provision of services. And that transcends then very much into the local space in Perth and Kinross. So I suppose to give some examples, on a national basis, there is a tri-service arrangement between the Scottish Ambulance Service, NHS 24 and Police Scotland, with a new 24/7 hub that sits within NHS 24. Essentially, any calls that come into the police that are assessed as having a mental health or vulnerability concern in them, where appropriate, can then be diverted at the earliest opportunity into NHS 24. That prevents a policing response unnecessarily and allows that mental health nursing attributes to basically deal with the call at the earliest opportunity. On a Tayside-wide basis, we've got a pilot car working out of Dundee at the moment, which is a mental health triage vehicle, again, with medical support and provision. And that, as an example, again, is looking to the earliest point of triage with persons found in crisis, because being with a police officer is not necessarily the best place of support for them. And that's been working really well. In our custody sense, working with the voluntary sector and support agencies, where we find people coming into police custody, we've got a new referral process, which gives people at point of crisis a direct referral into support agencies. And then across each of the 3 local authorities, we're looking at localised multi-agency community mental health hub approaches. And there's a really good example of that in Perth and Kinross. In fact, Perth and Kinross is leading the way for Tayside in that example, but I'll maybe let Chief Inspector Binney just give a bit more on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Davison. Yeah, just it's worth highlighting the work of probably two partners we have, one being the Nuke, which Mr. Davison was referring to, which has been operating now for around a year. That gives us a real option for taking people to the right place rather than spending unnecessary times in police custody. From my perspective, it's about empowering my officers to use the right services for people in mental health crisis. We're at the point now of trying to develop a framework to review the first year of the Nuke. As with other things, measuring preventative activity is really difficult. So we know how many times we've used their services, but we need to understand, having used their services once, how many times do individuals go direct to the Nuke without the need to call the police. So I had a conversation last week with Health and Social Care partners to try and work out what that review would look like, to try and identify the advantages, but also take that learning to Angus and Dundee as a potential model that would work there. The Lighthouse as well, I have to call it in a positive sense, the work that they have been engaged in and helped with, particularly around young people's mental health. So those 2 partners have been really of great use for us. So we need to understand how the Nuke has helped us in the last year and take that learning on to make maximum advantage.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart, followed by Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I think 2 questions. Just reflecting on the time that's the time that was spent on policing COP26, and also the I think the possible high number of absences due to COVID isolation. Can I ask how many shifts in Perth and Kinross have been covered by untrained police officers, so police officers pulled out of training at Tullyallen?
Thanks, Councillor, for that. You'll have seen nationally in the media that there's a decision being taken by Police Scotland to look to maximise the resources on the front line and also to minimise additional spread of the virus. Where we have probationers that are at Tullyallen, there is clearly a closer concentration of people. So part of the decision has been twofold. One is to reduce some of that spread in a confined environment by utilising the probationers earlier than the completion of their training. And the other part of it is absolutely to bolster and support the policing responses in communities. We in Tayside have 34 probationers that are spread across Perth and Kinross, Dundee and Angus. I don't have the exact breakdown in terms of how many of that 34 will have been deployed into Perth and Kinross, but the assurance I can give to the committee is that where we have deployed probationers, they have never been left exposed in isolation. They have absolutely been partnered up with an experienced officer, a tutor, constable, and there is a great benefit to that operational exposure for those officers, that actually as they go back to complete their training, they're going to have some real operational examples to then put with their academic and more quality, the procedural aspects that they learn at the college. I think the feedback we've had from our probationers that have been deployed, and Graham's just given me a note saying it was 12 out of that 34 is for Perth and Kinross. The feedback we've had has actually been really quite positive, that they've thoroughly enjoyed the experience that they've had in being able to deploy. They return to to Tully Island fairly shortly, and we can expect that batch of 34 to complete their training towards the end of March and become qualified deployable police officers out onto the streets of our communities. I trust that answers your question, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And my other question is on road safety and road crime. I think the last time you were here at committee, we had a conversation about enforcement of speed limits, particularly 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. And I just, as I recall, I asked about breakdowns of the number of detections which were in 20-mile-an-hour zones, and what steps the police could take in respect of their strategic outcome to meet the needs of local communities in terms of enforcement of 20-mile-an-hour limits. And I just wondered whether there was any update on either the statistics or the tactics that would be used to enforce 20-mile-an-hour limits.
Thanks again, Councillor. I'll pass to Chief Inspector Binney for that one.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The caveat to my answer is these figures are within 1 or 2 percentage points. There's a little bit of quick analysis in anticipation of the question. But as you would expect, the largest number of detections for speeding come from our roads policing officers being visible around our trunk roads and our 60 and 70 miles per hour limits with speed detection devices. The next more prevalent sources of detections are speed camera vans, and their detections are are higher within 40 miles per hour limits. So in suppose in going along the lines of where we see most of our deaths and serious injuries, the enforcement is largely directed towards the higher speed limited roads. I acknowledge the impact of communities on 20 miles per hour limits. We have had very small number of detections in 20 mile per hour limits. However, they are primarily around schools. I know we've had conversations before about the 20 mile per hour limits, the national position being that the default position would be that police would not routinely enforce these other than in schools or in identified areas where there is a high risk. So there have been some enforcement around schools. I am aware that the National Road Safety Framework is committed to review 20 mile per hour speed limits to look at their effectiveness and to look, amongst other things, about the ability to enforce them. So I think there's a national conversation to be had. We have done enforcement along the lines of the national strategy as it is at the moment and concentrated on and around schools. But the largest number of enforcement detections come from 40, 60 and 70 miles per hour limits.
Okay, thanks. I mean, just to sort of give community feedback, I mean, I remember that one of the very early conversations I had as an elected member, I think with Executive Director Renton, was around the introduction of road safety measures following a very sad fatality within my ward. And I know what you say about concentrating enforcement efforts on areas where there is either you know, an established pattern of fatalities or serious injuries, I think I would just like to reflect that in terms of the, you know, as I say, in terms of your strategic outcome, in terms of addressing the needs of local communities are pointing out where they think there are problems proactively, you know, in terms of anticipating where they're, you know, so it's a question of prevention rather than addressing matters after the fact. So, you know, where we do have repeated calls for reduced speed limits or for enforcement, it is a call from communities to anticipate and proactively address the potential road safety concerns, rather than you know, reduce the number of fatalities or serious incidents, rather than react to them after the fact. So just some feedback from communities there.
Councillor, I would just maybe give some assurance in that space, and I suppose a bit of a request as well. As Graham's indicated, we clearly, at the service, as with all services, you have to prioritise based on risk, and that's where the data tells us where the vast majority of injuries, road accidents, etc. occur. But we clearly want to be listening to our communities as well, and if there's a community concerns there, I would encourage, that's my appeal, I would encourage for that feedback to be coming into us directly. The more information that we're able to get, the bigger and better building of a picture that we're able to undertake. And we've the ability to look at things with partners, such as the deployment of speed monitoring equipment, look at additional preventative measures, and there's a number of examples, pop-up Bob and various other you know, measures that we can look to put in place around about perhaps the areas that are maybe less prevalent in terms of injuries and instances, to ensure that we're monitoring and being preventative, and where there is clearly concerns that then become evident to deploy the absolute enforcement activity that is required. I trust that gives a bit of assurance there.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I'll certainly feed that back to the communities within my ward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Part of the questions maybe been answered in the previous answer. It's on page 43 of the 214, and it's the speeding offences rate per 10,000, where Perth and Kinross seem to have the same sort of level as Dundee and Angus added together. So the question really is this because we have got so many trunk roads running through Perth and Kinross, which we sort of fit in with your previous answer, and also to reassure residents of Perth and Kinross that the people who've committed the speeding offences don't necessarily come from Perth and Kinross. Is it people visiting the area, driving through the area, or the trunk roads, or is it actually residents of Perth and Kinross that are committing these speeding offences at a much higher rate than residents of Dundee or Angus?
Thanks, Councillor. I think Chief Inspector Binney's just wanting to come in, but what you've essentially described there is the picture. You know, Perth and Kinross does have significantly more trunk road, and is also an area of great appeal for people to come and visit and to transition through. So that it certainly reflects why it is an area of greater focus in terms of you know, roads policing and local police officer activities, as well as listening to those community based concerns when they're reported in. I don't have the exact breakdown of you know, postcodes for those that are detected for speeding offences, but my anecdotal assessment of that would be that that there will be a large number of them that are of those detected that are not from the area. But I don't know.
No, as Mr. Davison says, I wouldn't have the exact figures, but whilst I don't see all of them, I see some of the detections, and there is nothing in my mind which would suggest a disproportionate amount of residents of Perth and Kinross, and quite a lot, I would say, of people passing through the area. It's probably just worth, I would view that positively. We have a roads policing team located in Perth. That's really positive for me, because they will be visible on our roads, not only to, and as we have talked about the road network coming through Perth and Kinross, through Broxden roundabout, through over the Friarton Bridge and down through the N93 and A9 is one of the main routes through Scotland, not only for speeding, but we've had a lot of notable detections of people passing through the area in possession of large quantities of drugs. So I'm really positive about the presence of our roads policing partners in and about Perth and Kinross, and a large number of those detections we see are people passing through or visiting the area.
Thanks. If you could just allow me just to comment, Vice Convener. Yeah, thanks very much. That was the answer I expected, and it is reassuring. The question came from being at a community council in Lunkerty, where they had an abnormally high rate of speeding offences when you look at the bald statistics, but then when you find that none of them were actually in Lunkerty, but there were the A9 which passed the side. It's the same as house statistics. Again, where if you've got a prison situated in your city or something like that, the figures for violence, and that can sort of it makes the figures look unbalanced. So thanks for your answer. I perfectly understand it.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions in the queue. Are there any comments on the reports?
Vice Convener, I don't know if the earlier question around about the fires in Tulloch that you wanted a policing response on, just briefly.
If you want to ask your question again, yes. Do you want to ask the question again?
Yes, I would like to ask the question again. There's been 2 fires in the last week in the Tulloch area. I've had quite a few concerns from constituents. We're just wondering if you have any update on what's happened there. Has there been the same person? Is it set deliberately? Just to allay their fears.
Yeah, I can take that, Councillor. I'm aware of the 2. One of them is currently assessed as a criminal act and under investigation. The other one came in at the end of last week and is assessed as not to be the case at the moment. However, given the similarity in location, I have asked for a review of that this morning just to ensure that there is no link. So that work is ongoing at the moment, just to give us some assurance that the second one, there is no criminal concerns about that one.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I don't see anybody requesting any comments. Are we happy to note the 2 reports?
Noted.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ewan, Phil and Graham, for your reports this morning, and thank you for turning up for the committee. I'll now hand back to the convener for the rest of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and my thanks to the Fire and Police Service for all the work they do for Perth and Kinross. Thank you. Members, we now move on to the main papers of the committee today, and the first one is item 5, which is the Community Planning Partnership update. I think Mr. Stokoe's here. I don't know if he wants to make a short introduction for us to introduce the paper.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'm here. So the paper just gives a summary of the work around CPP board since last committee, which gives an update on progress towards the LOIP and some of the locality work that's contributing to that. CPP board's involvement in climate change agenda, and also the promotion of the No One Left Behind employability scheme to board, to try and encourage partners to take up that opportunity. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Do we have any questions now for David or Lee? And we have a question from Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much, Convener. Item 1.3 on the paper discusses that there's going to be a multidisciplinary local working group looking at Cooper Angus and South Creef to do workshops, get local priorities and bring these up. And I think this is a brilliant thing that you are doing. The question I have, is there any monies attached to taking forward any actions and outcomes that these groups come up with?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. No, we'd be looking at using existing resource with that, and a particular focus on new ways of working, if you like. And this came out of the CPP conference workshop last April, where there was quite a lot of discussion about how perhaps we work with complex and vulnerable families, how we share resources, how we share data. So it's more about actually, thinking about how we can work with each other and with the community on a locality basis. So there's no additional money attached to this work.
Okay, maybe one for councillors to consider in the next month or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. Just a question. The report very much emphasises the importance of the climate change and with employability. Just want to know what the how the planning partnership will be able to help deal with rural transport issues. Certainly in my area, with the pressure on rural transport and the reduction of a key service, I'm aware of somebody who had a new job opportunity who then had to turn it down because the bus service that would have got them to work was terminated. Thankfully, thanks to Smarter Choices, Smarter Places funding, we were able to get another bus service in place, but unfortunately it doesn't cover the times that this person needs to go to work. And I just want to know what impact involvement the planning partnership can have in dealing with these issues with people staying rurally and having resilient travel or ability to take jobs, knowing that there will be adequate public transport services to get them to and from work. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor. I mean, transport isn't my area of expertise, but I do know it's often an issue that's raised by the rural action partnerships as well. I see Claire's put in an A for answer. So, but I can say Mark Speed from Tactron is a very active member of the board as well, and some of the workshops we've had around the Lloyd. So it is something that he's cited to. But Claire may wish to say more.
Claire, you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, David. And I think I was just going to add to what David had said there in terms of the wider CPP role. So the Community Planning Partnership have identified these priorities. Clearly, rural transport, as you will have heard through possibly a number of different forums, not least the child poverty area, that it is absolutely an issue that is affecting many of our residents in rural areas. It has been identified by the CPP as one of the areas where collectively we can work together to have a more positive impact. The point that I was going to make was exactly the one that David made there, that the director of Tactran is in fact a very active member of the CPP. He has been very heavily involved in the locality work that David's just described in terms of the workshops and some of the locality work that we're progressing. And Tactran are currently, as you will be aware, pulling together their Tayside-wide transport strategy. So there will be a number of strands within that at a strategic and indeed an operational level that Tactran, but certainly wider partners, will be involved in terms of identifying what the issues are, what we can do in terms of reaching in with services and working closely, obviously, with the colleagues within the public transport team to make a more affordable offer to our residents in rural communities. So work in progress, but some good considerations in terms of areas of improvement across the CPP and indeed within the council and indeed from Tactran's point of view.
Thank you, Claire. I have a comment request, but I'm just wondering if there's any further questions. No, then I will ask Councillor Peter Barrett for your comment, please.
Thanks very much, Convener. I just wanted to commend Lynn Webster on the presentation that she gave to the Community Planning Partnership on the No One Left Behind programmes. If members have the opportunity to hear that, then I would recommend that they do, or perhaps the presentation can be circulated. But I think that the work that has been done, particularly with regard to the young persons guarantee, is excellent, and that was in the face of some rigid inflexibility from the Scottish Government as to the deadlines for spending that money. I'm pleased to report that there has now been some flexibility given on that following interventions by council leaders through COSLA, but there is still more required, and I think if any of members of this committee can use their influence with Holyrood members to provide additional flexibility, that would be welcome, specifically with regard to the timings of spending and also the pressures put upon councils to come up with their 3-year implementation plans while only being guaranteed 1 year of funding. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Peter. Have we got any other comments coming through, please? Don't see any. Okay, then, members, if I may just quickly sum up, this is the regular meeting update for the Community Planning Partnership update, which gives us work that's ongoing with the Local Outcomes Improvement Plan and the work that's been done there. Obviously, the No One Left Behind employment funding, which I note that we've received as Perth and Ross 580,000 from the Scottish Government. And importantly, of course, climate change, which will now play an ever increasing amount of importance in our lives in the months to come. Members, we are asked to note the report, and particularly that the board, the CPP board, prepare the new Local Outcomes Improvement Plan, respond to the climate emergency, and promote skills and employability opportunities. Are we happy to note the report?
Noted.
Thank you very much, members. And I accept your apologies, Councillor Bay, that you've got to leave. Sorry to see you have to go. Members, we now move to paper 6, which is the Housing Revenue Account Strategic Financial Plan. And I'm going to ask Mrs. Mailer to introduce for us.
Thank you, Convener. This report sets out the proposed Housing Revenue Account budget for 5 years from 2022-23 to 2026-27. It recommends increases to rents for houses and other HRA property service charges and an appropriate level of reserves. The proposed budget for the next 5 years of the Capital Investment Programme, totalling 83.3 million from 2022-23 to 26-27, is also detailed. The HRA 30-year business plan has been updated to reflect and confirm the affordability of the proposals. The council owns and manages over 7,760 properties. The Housing Revenue Account meets all day-to-day expenditure relating to housing stock, as well as investment through our capital programme. There are several factors that influence the rent setting proposals, both in the short term, such as the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 and increasing costs of materials, and indeed in the longer term, such as the climate change agenda and the ambitions within the Housing to 2040. The rent proposals this year also take into account pressures in relation to Scottish Government priorities, for example, the electrical inspection condition reports and additional capacity to enable us to progress essential work to meet climate change targets. As everyone here is acutely aware, the impacts of COVID have been significant and will be long lasting. We will continue to provide wraparound support to any tenant who is struggling financially or has difficulty in meeting the rental obligations. Some of the support measures for our tenants include financial assistance through a tenancy sustainment fund or the locality team Think Yes budgets, and a team of our dedicated housing support officers that can provide that tailored advice and support. We remain committed to our priority of maintaining rents that are affordable to our tenants. We've assessed the affordability of our proposals and determined that 84% of people can afford the proposed rents. We also have and will continue to have one of the lowest local authority rents in Scotland and the lowest social rent in Tayside. Committee is aware that we are required to consult tenants affected by the proposed increases and to have regard to their views when agreeing the proposed rent increases today. Engaging with our tenants remains a key priority in ensuring they have an opportunity to have their say in the decision-making process. As you will see from the paper, tenants voted on 3 rent options and received information of the impact and affordability of these. All tenants have had an opportunity to influence this important decision. And the total, you'll see from the paper, a total of 2,177, that's 28% of our tenants, an increase of 70% from last year, responded to the voting survey, with 54% voting for option 1, a 3% increase. This rent will allow the housing revenue account to continue with the same high level of service that is provided to tenants, whilst meeting the challenges we face in terms of increasing costs to the housing revenue account, implementing new legislation and meeting additional and new priorities. The additional investment will be invested in a range of areas, not least additional capacity to help us achieve a net zero carbon emissions housing stock, additional investment in terms of our tenancy sustainment fund, maintaining our successful buyback funding and buyback programme, and indeed an overall capital investment of 83.3 million over a 5-year period. Within this, including 24.6 million for new build. So the recommended increase is in line with the views of our tenant and it will ensure that our rent levels remain affordable to our tenants and compare favourably at a national level. The team are here and would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Claire. Do we have any questions? It's starting to come through now. Here we go. So, Councillor Waters, you're first.
Thank you, convener. Two questions, but quite happy to leave my second one till the end, if that's what you want. The first one is just to do with the cost of living with some of our tenants, especially due to the increase in fuel costs. Are we noticing any difference in the ability of tenants to pay as we're seeing the cost of living go up due to fuel costs? And is there any work being done to kind of predict if this is going to get worse as the pressures with the cost of living hit our tenants a lot harder? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and I think in response to the first part of the question, yes, we are absolutely, I think, seeing that tenants are feeling the pressures. I think fuel costs, but also the impacts of the pandemic. So there are obviously wider factors at play there. We have had an increase in the number of tenants that are in rent arrears. And we have had an increase in our rent arrears figures. The average increase has increased. The average level of arrears has increased over the course of the last year to 18 months and longer. We're obviously acutely aware of the increasing challenges facing our tenants in respect of fuel costs and indeed fuel poverty, and we've got a range of measures in place to minimise and mitigate these impacts. These include all of the physical measures that we undertake to the property through the capital investment programme, through external fabric works, energy efficiency works, and ensuring that our properties meet the Scottish Housing Quality Standard. We also are progressing a range of actions within our housing, fuel poverty and financial hardship action plan. And if you do want some more detail, we can share that with you. But that very much is about raising awareness of the financial support and assistance available to tenants, ensuring that all offices have got a really good understanding and awareness of the support and assistance that is available to tenants. So briefings, staff training, this includes our trade staff as well as indeed our frontline housing officers, and working closely with SCARF to fully implement the aims and objectives and ensure that they're out and about there providing advice and information. And then again, over and above that, very, very close working with colleagues through citizens' advice, floating support and the welfare rights team, ensuring that we are maximising incomes. So a bit of a whistle stop there, but there's a huge amount of work. We cannot afford to be complacent. The teams are out there and it's an ongoing standard item on every single team agenda at the moment to ensure that we're giving the support where we can and giving that targeted support to tenants that are struggling with increasing household costs.
Did you have a second question, Councillor?
Yes, it's related to a question I've asked before, but it would be an interesting update, especially on page 76. The rent increases, the two of the items on it is increased cost of materials and contract price increases. Are these items due to construction inflation? And are we seeing are we seeing the construction inflation starting to lessen, or is it roughly the same? And what is the pressures? Or is this the pressures that we see in front of us on the services we provide?
Thank you for the question. Yes, these are the pressures that we are experiencing in terms of the increase in materials and construction costs. I don't know whether, Stephen, you would like to come in and add a little bit more detail to that response.
The cost, the increased cost of the 220,000 in terms of the pressure primarily relates to the cost of materials that we're seeing through our stores and in terms of repairs. So, for example, electrical costs have gone up 4 times this year. There's been like a 3%, a 4% and 5% increases. We're seeing that across joinery, building, plumbing materials as well. So we're hoping that the costs will level off in terms of stock and materials, but that's something that we'll have to keep a close eye on. And obviously, if that continues into next financial year, we'll need to consider how we deal with that next year through this process as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks again, Convener. I wanted to ask the Deputy Director whether she thinks that our tenants would benefit from a more robust rent strategy moving forward. If you look at the table on in paragraph 2.7, you'll see over the past 5 years seesawing rent rises at variance to the rent strategy, and it's sometimes at considerable variance to the rent strategy. And at a time of increasing hardship, at a time of increasing financial uncertainty, a time of increasing inflation, I wondered whether our tenants would benefit from a more rigid adherence to a rent strategy, which may be confined by smaller variances in terms of the options proposed by officers to tenants. I think if you add up the difference between the rent strategy and the actual rent increases implemented, the strategy would have realised an increase in 9%, and the actual increases come to 8.5%. So there's not much difference, but the impact of the change each year would be considerably less if we had a greater adherence to the strategy. And do we need to have a considered look at the strategy in light of the financial outlook and greater inflation, greater costs and rising staff costs, and see that or to ensure that it remains fit for purpose?
Claire, would you like to come in on that?
Yes, thank you for the question, and I think you raise an interesting point here, in particular in relation to the current situation in terms of increased costs, particularly around about inflation, and I think in response to the last question, in terms of the rent strategy, the rent strategy is there to provide an indicator. If we stick rigidly to the rent strategy and what sits within that, then that whole sort of true form of actually the process of actually engaging with tenants and setting rents to reflect their views and the priorities for the year ahead, I think could potentially be undermined somewhat. What we do try to do is ensure that we don't, you know, if we were to stick to the rent strategy, say at 2.2%, and there is a need for less, then we would maybe be setting the rents and having a surplus that we didn't actually need. So it is absolutely there as an indicator. I do, however, agree with, I think, the point, and we have had discussions as a housing management team in terms of the current rent strategy and position and the need for us to review that going forward. So that will be a priority for the team into next year, to review that with our tenants in light of all of the points that you have just raised, Councillor Barrett, in terms of the increase in costs and inflationary costs.
Okay, I'm grateful to that, and I'd be interested to know, you know, what the timing of that would be and how elected members would be involved. I do think if you have a rent strategy of 2.2%, you know, which is below the national rate of increases at 2.42%, below the rate of inflation, then you end up with, you know, wild rent options being proposed, such as 4% this year, and those would be avoidable if we had a more coherent rent strategy, or stuck to a more coherent rent strategy.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duff, you're next on my list.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, it's very encouraging to note that the Perth and Kinross rents are 5% lower than our neighbouring local authorities and 18% lower than the local housing associations. But my question surrounds the differences between the three options. Options 2 and 3 talk about enhanced measures to tackle antisocial behaviour, but there's no specific reference to that in option 1. And I also note that improving neighbourhoods is the third highest priority for our tenants. So my question really is, what antisocial behaviour measures are included within the tenants' preferred option of option 1? Thank you.
Claire, would you like to come in on that?
Yes, thank you for the question, and I might bring Elaine in to provide a little bit more detail. Our tenants have indicated to us, and I think certainly it has been raised through committee in the past in terms of our response to antisocial behaviour. When we go out to consult with our tenants, we need to consult with them on a range of measures. We certainly, over the course of the last year, have introduced a number of improvements around and about antisocial behaviour that we've just utilised, that we've just met or are meeting within our existing resources. The options within option 2 and 3 would actually to be put an enhanced level of resources in to tackle antisocial behaviour. So it's not as if we are not doing anything. Antisocial behaviour remains a key priority for the service. It certainly is a key priority for our tenants. We're undertaking a range of measures. We have listened to the feedback from tenants and are progressing a range of improvements, and we have had improved performance in recent months in relation to our response times and indeed antisocial behaviour complaints resolution. That additional capacity gave tenants an option to actually step up that and enhance that a wee bit further.
Thank you. Elaine, did you want to come in?
Yes, just building on what Claire said, I think at committee last year we were asked about antisocial behaviour and we committed to go away and have a look at that, and that's what we did. We amended our policies and procedures, we put enhanced monitoring in place to look at the timescales and our resolutions to resolve some of the complaints that we received. We carrying out audits and spot checks as well to look at further improvement actions that we can take. We realigned the team leader from the Safer Communities team to report directly to the service manager, who's got lead responsibility for localities, and we've put more resources and tools within our teams so they can respond more effectively, such as the use of soundproofing, the noise app, the Think Yes budget. So although there has been concerns with antisocial behaviour, we've, as Claire has said, we've used our in-house resources and reviewed and restructured so we can provide more support and assistance to our tenants.
Thank you, Elaine. Councillor Barrett, any further questions?
It was
No, I don't
myself.
have any further
Oh,
questions.
sorry. My screen's going up and down all the time. Sorry, Councillor.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
That was a comprehensive response to what we're currently doing. Thank you.
My screen seems to chat function seems to be sliding up and down all the time. I'm sorry about that. Councillor McEwen, I think you're next.
Thank you, Convener. I had a whole list of questions to ask, but my colleagues have already asked most of them so far. So I'm left with, Appendix 5 sort of highlights where Petherton sits amongst all the other councils for rent. And I would comment and say this doesn't look like a very updated table, because you have ourselves sitting at 3% increase and everybody else at 2.42. So I imagine that we don't have the information from the other councils to complete this table, and that as league tables go, we may go up or we may go down, depending on how these other councils behave in their decision making. So my question is, could we have, when available, could the committee be emailed an update of this table once we know the outcome from the other councils' rent increases, please?
Claire?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor McEwen. Stephen Coyle's just indicated to me that he might have a little bit more information, so I'll hand over to Stephen to give you some, maybe a wee bit more detail. But yes, once the full information is available, we absolutely will share that with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to say that sort of we just took an average over the last 5 years of increases for this table. I think it's been particularly difficult this year to do, because we normally look at the previous year's increases and sort of use that as a guide, but we're sort of aware that the COVID-19 impact and the sort of rent increases last year may be an outlier compared to the sort of normal levels that councils will increase their rents by. So yeah, we will receive the true information probably about early May time, I think it normally comes through, so we can certainly send that around the committee and give everybody an update. But I think in terms of our projected position about fourth lowest, I think there's enough of a difference between ourselves and sort of the councils just above us to maintain that, even if their rent increases were lower than the 2.42% that were on this list.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. Appendix 3, Councillor Waters brought up a question about the inflationary costs related to materials. The rest of that table says zero for the future years. I just wanted to confirm, so this is said in committee, that the reason these figures are zero is because we don't know the answer, rather than that they were projecting them to have no problem at all.
Claire or Stephen on this one?
Comment on that, please.
You're right in the assumption that at the moment we don't know what future price increases will be, so we didn't want to sort of put a figure in there and it would be a stab in the dark, to be honest. I think once we've got more information at the beginning of next year, and when we go through this process again, if we're still seeing increases in cost of materials, then we'll factor that into the budget setting process and consult with our tenants on that as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. I've got a note and have a question from Councillor Jarvis, but I've also got a note saying further down she may have left the meeting. So I'll move on to Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. My question is on the figures in Appendix 1, the housing revenue account budget, specifically the financing and capital charges, which vary from 7.25 million to over 8 million over the next 5 years. I just wonder whether, and a note as well, sorry, that that figure represents somewhere between 1/5 and 1/4 of the total rental income. I just wonder whether officers have given consideration to a strategy which would involve paying down the total borrowing on the housing revenue account. So, for example, if we had no borrowing, then we would have 7-8 million pounds, anything between 7 and 8 million pounds additional every year to invest in the housing stock within Perth and Kinross.
Stephen, would you like to come on this one?
Yeah, we work very closely with our corporate colleagues and treasury management when we're looking at the loan charges and in terms of what the available options are to us. But in order to answer the question, and can we pay down the debt, that although we're paying £7.5–8 million in loan charges, actually outstanding debt is well over £100 million in terms of housing revenue account at this point. So we would need to find that level of money to pay off the debt to allow us not to have loan charges against the account, and obviously the housing revenue account is not in that position to have that level of money to pay off the debt. We will continue to work closely with treasury management, and if it is more affordable to pay off some levels of debt at a low level rather than sort of reprioritising the debt, then we will do that every year going through this process. But we're certainly not in a position to clear off the debt at this point.
Yeah, so, sorry, just to be clear, obviously, you know, it couldn't happen within a single year, or probably even within a single council term. What I was meaning was, have you given consideration to a strategy which would, you know, either pay off or at least substantially reduce that debt over maybe a period of 10 or 20 years, for example?
Certainly haven't. Yeah, we've certainly not looked at a strategy of how we would manage to clear the debt, like the whole debt. As I said, we do look at it on an annual basis to say what is the best option, or what can we do, what available options have we got to sort of minimise the increase in loan charges, to sort of look at something we can consider. But to look at a strategy to clear off the debt would mean sort of generating surplus funding within the housing revenue account and increasing the rent increases probably substantially more than what would be required to deliver just the normal day-to-day service. But it's certainly something that I can question and discuss with our treasury management colleagues going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I can't see any further questions. I know there's a comment request come through, but I can't see any further questions at the moment. If there's none coming through now, I'm going to proceed to move the paper. And there's no questions. Here we go. So this is one of the most important, if not the most important paper we consider as a committee. The income of the housing service enabling it to carry out its functions comes entirely from rents and predominantly from residential properties. Therefore, a vital part of the budget process comes from setting rents for the coming year. As always, tenant engagement plays a vital part of the process and has done this year. The three options offered were 3%, 3.5% and 4%. The minimum option reflected inflationary costs and the extra priorities from the Scottish Government, that is electrical inspection conditions reports, and to fund essential work to meet climate change targets. The paper outlines all options and individual works that could be achieved if chosen. Very pleasing was the increase in responses this year, up from 1,282 last year to 2,177 this year, a rise of 70%. The 3% option was chosen by 54% of replies, which is not surprising given many are no doubt worried about rising costs, especially fuel prices. Given this increase, it is pleasing to note that our rents remain some of the lowest in Scotland, likely fourth lowest. Our affordability model shows that most tenants can meet the proposed new rents on income alone without considering any housing benefits received. However, some tenants may have difficulties, and a range of support is in place, such as the Tenancy Sustainment Fund, increased by £50,000 by the chosen rent increase, Think Yes budgets, and welfare rights support. Here, I cannot stress too much the need for any of our tenants who are experiencing difficulties to get in touch with their locality office. They won't get laughed at or shouted at. They will just find someone who is there and wants to help. The earlier they get in touch, as always, it is easier to help. The paper looks at the capital investment programme over the coming 5 years, 83.3 million, and details improvement works, including a proposed 19.1 million on SHQS future developments, which will be allocated upon completion of the stock condition survey. Other elements of the capital programme are detailed, including the necessary increase of council house stock by new builds, buybacks and conversion of existing commercial properties. By March 2022, 489 new council houses will have been built since 2011, 252 former council houses repurchased, and 12 properties converted to residences. The paper concludes with the reserve strategy, uncommitted reserves maintained at £1 million, and details of rents and other properties and proposed housing service charges increases. It is recommended, therefore, that we note the following items. Now, we are looking at item 11.5 on the paper, and 11.5 includes paragraphs 1 to 10. Now, I'm hoping members don't need me to read all 10 out, but if you wish me to, I will. However, I move the paper as is written from 11.5, section 1 to section 10 inclusive. Vice Convener, would you like to second the report?
Yes, thank you very much, Convener. Yes, I'm happy to second the report, and I agree with everything you just said. I would just like to highlight the 70% increase of tenants being engaged with how their rent is spent, and those percentage increases that they're asked to look at each year. I'm happy to formally second the report.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I should ask now, do we have any amendments?
Convener, I've signalled an E for amendment in the chat.
Yes, certainly. Just picked it up. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please, Councillor. Yeah.
Thanks again, Convener, and I want to say that I think this is a small, but I think it's a very significant amendment, and the amendment which I've furnished to committee services, I think has been shared on screen, and basically is to insert after recommendation 11.5 numeral 1 plus 38,000 for enhanced measures to tackle antisocial behaviour, which will result in a reduction of 38,000 in CFCR. As members will recall, I raised the issue of the Council's response to antisocial behaviour previously at committee, and was encouraged by the response from the Deputy Director that this was an issue of concern, also raised by our tenant groups, which would be built into the budget process. At the time during committee, there was widespread cross-party support across the chamber, and I think including from yourself, Convener, and Councillor Tom McEwen and others, on the need to enhance our response to antisocial behaviour. So it's disappointing not to see that enhanced response feature in the baseline proposal of option 1, which was presented to tenants. And that doesn't seem to me to be in the spirit of the Perth and Kinross offer or the Think Yes responsive way of delivering services. And it doesn't seem to me that officers have taken sufficiently on board the concerns expressed by members and tenants. As we've heard earlier, antisocial behaviour has worsened during COVID for obvious reasons of people spending more time at home, working from home due to restrictions, and suffering greater and more prolonged issues of noise, disturbance and clash of lifestyles. And it is right that we act in response to that and acknowledge that in these particularly difficult times that an enhanced response is required, which goes beyond business as usual. We heard earlier from the police on the impacts of COVID on people's mental health as well. The impacts of antisocial behaviour are serious and significant on the health and well-being, on the sense of security and safety that residents should enjoy, and the misery that they suffer when having to endure antisocial behaviour for prolonged periods of time. I believe that the additional funding will improve how this council engages with the perpetrators of antisocial behaviour to resolve problems more effectively and deliver better outcomes for our localities and communities, our tenants and residents. Convener, I want to be as flexible as possible when it comes to dealing with the 38,000 cost of the enhanced measures. I've indicated in my amendment that the funding would come from a reduced contribution to CFCR. Equally, it could come from an allocation from reserves and be dealt with as a pressure for in the budget for future years. I'm happy to go either way. I don't think that there's a great deal to choose between either option, but I think the important thing is to enhance our response at this time to antisocial behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Convener, thank you.
Councillor Liz Barrett, please go ahead.
Thank you. As councillors, we know that antisocial behaviour is a huge issue for residents, whether it's noise from inside or outside homes, graffiti, rubbish in gardens and common areas, issues with pets and verbal abuse. Every report we receive as councillors tells us of the misery for those who are affected, whether they're council or private tenants or owner-occupiers. And I'm very grateful to the joined-up approach being taken by the Safer Communities team on housing and the police, working with voluntary groups and other agencies where appropriate to try to tackle things. And I do appreciate everything that Elaine Ritchie said, but we could be doing more. We know that antisocial behaviour and the constant fear of having to cope with the next incident and the hassle causes huge distress and impacts on mental health, often for people who are already struggling with ill health and poverty. We know from the survey that while 54% of tenant respondents supported option 1 for the 3% increase, 46%, that's 29% for option 2 and 17% for option 3, would have supported a higher rent increase to include enhanced measures to tackle antisocial behaviour. I ask you all, please do support this amendment to help make Perth and Kinross a great place to live for everyone. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you, Councillor Barrett. I'm going to open up the comments, but I would just like to clarify one.
5-minute recess, please.
We can have. I'm going to come to that in a moment, Councillor McEwen, if you wish. But I would like to get to a point that we can have comments first, and then we can have a recess to discuss the amendment in our groups if we want. But before I do that, if you can bear with me just a second, I just want to clarify with Claire, just for everybody's sake and my own. This is obviously an amendment. We're looking at the decisions that our tenants made was option 1, which didn't include the enhancement. Is there any problem by including that, Claire? Are we overriding their tenants' choices? Can I just clarify that with you, Claire?
Yeah, I think, Convener, you raise a good point there. We absolutely have been out. You can see 28% of our tenants responded to the consultation exercise. They absolutely have been involved in feeding in terms of their priorities. So to plug it in on a recurring basis, I think members of the committee need to give consideration to tenants' views as the paper advises in terms of the approval of the paper and the 3% proposed increase. And I think, again, in terms of the amendment, the views of tenants and our obligations to ensure that we're taking into account the views of tenants should also be given consideration on this particular.
Thank you, Claire. I'll open up now to comments. Councillor McEwen, I know you've put a C in there already, so I'll let you go ahead.
Thank you, Convener. I probably don't need a recess. I've clarified my thoughts looking at the papers. I've always been impressed with the housing revenue account papers from when I started in the council. I think the rents that we offer our tenants and giving them their choices of how their rents are increased is an ideal way of doing this. There is a property in Blairgowrie that's ex-council house, is 3-bedroom, that's up for rent at £900 per calendar month. That's 3 times the rent that we offer as a council, and more than double that our other social landlords offer. And you can obviously see in the current economic cycle the pressure that we put on any family needing to take such a large chunk of their income onto actual private rent. So it's ultimately very important, and all the things that you have said in your comments to this paper, I totally agree with. With regard to the amendment, I wholeheartedly support us putting extra money for antisocial behaviour. The mechanism by which the amendment approves to do this won't increase the rents, so it doesn't go against the rent increase that the residents have asked for. All it does is reduce a very small amount of money that we go to pay back our debt, and I think it's an appropriate way to do that. So I would like to say just now that I'll support the amendment, because I don't think it goes against what our residents see. It gives them another way of getting a better service without it hitting them in the pocket.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lang, I think you want to speak as well. Comment.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'd be supporting this amendment as well. I think that I have cases in my own ward with antisocial behaviour that's been recurring, and sometimes then other tenants move on and they then face the same recurring, especially in one instance where it's an elderly gentleman and a woman on her own, and they're constantly it's ruining their life. So I think that we have a responsibility to I know we take it seriously, but to invest some more money in trying to address these problems. So yeah, I think I'm not only guesting on this committee, but I think it's a sensible suggestion. And I will be supporting amendment.
Fine. Thank you, Councillor. I can't see any further comments coming through. I have had a request come through for a comfort break as well, so I'm going to suggest a 10-minute break, so that gives a chance to consult my colleagues and also include a comfort break for everybody. So we'll have a 10-minute recess. We should be back here at 11:30, 11:31. Thank you. Right, according to my clock, we're now back to 11:31. Hopefully everybody's back in. As I said, we were going to have a short group consultation, and I've spoken to Councillor Barrett. We are happy to incorporate his amendment into the motion. As I've said, we have suggested on this occasion that the funds, the 38,000, comes from reserves rather than CFCR, which allows it to be a one-year incorporation of the motion without being recurring, which gives us the protection that we haven't overridden our tenants' choices in this instance. However, as Councillor Barrett said, I would like to ask officers if we can have their assurance that they will discuss this matter with tenants in the upcoming year and at the next rent setting process. Claire, could I ask you to come in on that? If she's here.
Sorry, Councillor Ahern, sorry, Bron, I think she's having a little bit of connection difficulty. She'll
Right,
be back.
okay.
So
Okay.
just struggling a minute, if you could just hold on.
Well, hold on for a minute. I'll have to repeat that all over again.
Councillor Ahern, can I give the assurances that we would discuss this with the tenants? Would that be okay? Given Claire's having some trouble.
That'd be fine. As I say, Councillor Barrett was concerned that we do stick with this and do discuss it in the upcoming year and at the next round of tenant conferences and decision-making process. And if you're happy with that yourself, yep. Councillor Barrett, I'm assuming you're happy with that?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I'll cover it in my summing up when we get there. Thank you.
Right. Okay.
As a seconder, I'm happy with the proposal.
Fine. I'm happy with the motion now incorporating that 38,000. So that's that, and you've seconded that. So if I can leave it with you, then Councillor Barrett, to sum up.
Thanks, convener. And I said in proposing that I was relaxed as to whether we went through the CFCR route or with an allocation from reserve. So I'm sticking to that. I do think it is important that this initiative is taken forward in good faith, and I'm grateful for Elaine's assurance on that. I would like to scotch the myth or suggestion that in any way are we going against the wishes of our tenants. I think Councillor Liz Barrett made a very pertinent remark when she said that 47%, almost half of our tenants, sought enhanced supports for antisocial behaviour, as well as higher rent increases to deliver other benefits as well. So we're not going against the majority wishes of our tenants. In fact, we're probably addressing a greater majority of them with the changes that we've made today. And I'm very grateful for the cross-party support that we've received, and for the fact that you've incorporated it into the motion, convener. So thanks to all the councillors and groups here for that. I think it will make a big difference to our tenants, our residents and our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. As I said, I just queried the point because I just wanted to clarify it for all of us. Councillor Liz Barrett, did you want to add anything before we come to an end?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Convener.
Convener, I've already commented, but
yes,
if you wish.
Yes, it's just coming through. If you're happy to add a comment, yes, certainly you can.
Well, thank you very much, because you didn't need to do that, so thank you very much. The only other comment I'd like to make is, during the debate and the paper as well, Councillor Barrett brought up our baseline percentage increase to 2.2%, and whether that's really future-proof now. And I actually just wonder whether the antisocial behaviour is very important thing for us to tackle with our residents. That the funding for that should become part of our core funding and be taken into account when we review our 2.2% level going forward. And actually, is it really a choice that we want our residents to need to make, or is it something that's the core baseline of our services as a council towards our tenants that we tackle and we invest in that social behaviour? So I think that's something for officers to look at as we make decisions for the future in relations to our HRA.
Okay, thanks for that, Tom. Yeah, I'll let you come in because I'm such a nice person. You say that's why it is. We'll discuss that, no doubt. We'll come that up, bring that up for you, no problems. Members, that concludes then. I think that paper we've moved it with the additional 38,000. We can now move on to item 7, which is the disposal of property numbers 1 to 5, Cumberland Barracks, Cooper Angus. Elaine, I think you want to introduce this one.
Thanks, Convener. This report seeks approval of the disposal of properties at 1 to 5 Cumberland Barracks. It recommends disposal by auction of properties on the terms and conditions contained within the report and any other terms and conditions considered appropriate by the Executive Director and the Head of Legal Services. It also seeks approval for the Property Subcommittee to approve the proposed disposal and recommends that should the property fail to sell at auction, it should be remarketed for sale through the traditional manner or at an auction in compliance with the disposal of land by Land Local Authority Scotland regulations and the relevant property's market value. Cumberland Barracks is a Category B listed building built between 1745 and 1766. The building is a 3-storey L-plan red rubble construction with white stone dressings. Contained within the building are 6 flats, 1 bedsit and 5 one-bedroom properties, all of which are currently empty due to significant challenges in identifying suitable tenants due to the small size and dark interior of the properties. Repairs and improvements and maintenance to the building are also challenging and costly due to its listed status. Despite a range of measures to encourage take-up of the properties, some have been empty since April 2020, resulting in the loss of rental income to the service while still having to maintain the fabric and security of the building. An assessment carried out by the District Valuer in August 2021 has indicated a value of around £256,000 for the building with the 6 properties. Through our consultation and engagement framework, tenants were fully consulted in early December 2021 and no concerns were raised about the proposal. The decision to dispose of these properties has not been taken lightly given the significant pressure for social housing in Perth and Kinross, but given the lack of demand, high refusals and the significant ongoing cost to maintain the building, disposing of the properties is considered to be the right decision as it will enable monies to be reinvested into our new build or regeneration programme, providing homes that applicants and tenants want and will prevent any further financial loss to the housing service. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. I'll open up to questions, and we have them already. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. My question is it the intention to market the properties as one lot as opposed to 6 individual properties?
I think, Claire, you wanted to come in on some of these.
Yes, that is correct. That is the intention.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
At the moment, I've several questions, but I'll just ask a couple of short ones. We've had other photographs circulated today, and I was just wondering, which are the most recent photographs? When were the photographs that appear in the paper? When were they taken? And in a time frame compared with the pictures we've had circulate today, because the building looks in different condition. On both the different photographs. So could somebody illuminate me as to which are the most up-to-date photographs and when the photographs in the paper were actually taken, because I see there's satellite dishes, etc. on there, and they don't seem to be there in the photographs I've seen today.
Elaine, would you like to come in on that one?
So the pictures that were circulated today are the most recent, so that's following the work in terms of the improvement work to the exterior of the building, so that was carried out last year, and the pictures that were included in the committee report are before the work was commenced.
Would it not have been better for us to have seen the most up-to-date pictures if we're making a judgment on the building, to have seen the current state of the building rather than pictures before works were done?
Yes, I probably agree with that, but it was a last addition to include pictures within the report and timescales to get the papers concluded, and that's the pictures that we had available. And apologies, yeah, that would have made sense.
Well, I think it's really unfortunate that that wasn't stated, that these were pictures from a past time and they weren't up to date. So I do think that was an error by officers and the convener, etc., in presenting this paper. So that's the first question. Second question, and I'll then give way and come back with other questions, allow me, convener, is have we done any soft marketing on this property yet?
Claire, would you like to come in on that one?
I think without sort of discussing too much detail in a public forum, I think we anticipate that there will be interest. I don't think, Elaine, we can say any more than that at this stage.
So the answer would be yes, we have done. We don't have to mention names or anybody's interest. I'm just wondering if we have done some soft marketing.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And finally, the question I don't understand really is how a private somebody taking over this business, this building privately, will be able to achieve higher rentals if they cannot do it. There's nothing they can do internally. They will still have exterior works and that to do, although they will not have to do that for a couple of years by the looks of the most current pictures. How is it a viable proposition to pay at least £192,000, which would be the minimum we would get from it, and then be able to market out and for rentals? I don't see how a private or a company or anything can make them more attractive than we can.
Claire, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think until such time as we go out to the market and test the market and see what the level of interest is and what the actual intentions would be from any other, private buyer or indeed developer, I think we don't have the detailed answer to that. I think the situation that we have at the moment is, as a social landlord, we are unable to bring the property up to the required standards affordably and indeed meet our landlord requirements under the Scottish Secure Tenancy Agreement to prospective council tenants as it stands at the moment. But I think it will be interesting to see in terms of the market. Certainly, if any private landlord were to take the property on, there will be a level of input from colleagues across the council who support private sector landlords in ensuring that any future offer is suitable and meets any sort of required sort of standards within that sector.
Thanks, convener. I have other questions, but I'll come in at the end. Thank you.
I'll come back to you. Yeah, Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, convener. I think two questions. The first one is, having spent so much money on the building and obviously desirous of maintaining its listed status, but also, I mean, it is a notable building in the centre of Cooper Angus, and nobody would want to see it fall into a state of disrepair in future. Would it be possible to add a condition to any agreed contract for sale of the property imposing on the purchaser obligations to maintain the property, you know, in terms of its conservation status. I'm conscious that I got a reply, I think from Ms. Dow in Housing, indicating that, let me just find it quickly, sorry, it was a reply to Councillor Sarwar, I think, who'd been in correspondence about this, that in terms of concerns that a private business or individual wouldn't maintain the condition of the building, they wouldn't have an option regarding that, as legal action would be taken against them due to the listed building status. That would obviously fall back on the council in terms of enforcement or building standards. So just to make it very clear in terms of the conditions of sale or the conditions of the contract, would that be a possibility?
I'll ask Claire that one, but would it not been in the deed, some sort of commitment, a covenant in the deeds to maintain the building?
Yeah, and I think I would refer councillors to section 1.2 of the report as a category B listed status. Any maintenance of repairs that we've been required to meet must follow the strict guidelines and be undertaken in consultation with Historic Scotland and indeed the council's conservation officers. So obviously, yes, the answer to that question is that will apply going forward.
And your second question, Councillor Stewart?
Thanks. So obviously the substantial cost quoted is for the replacement of the coping stones and recoating of the exterior building, costing £127,000. I think that the actual breakdown of that is that the recoating of the building was, which needs to be done on an ongoing basis, would be £67,000. I just want to query the statement that the recoating needs to be carried out every 2 years. I consulted a professional stonemason familiar with red rubble construction, who indicated that every 2 years was for lime washing of the exterior would be excessive. 5 years would be more normal, and depending on the condition or level of deterioration, and given that this has just been redone and brought up to standard, that period could actually be extended to every 10 or 15 years. And so I just wanted to query whether every 2 years is actually far too cautious a statement in terms of the requirement to recoat.
Claire, you come back on that one.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think I'll bring in our more technical expertise, Nicola Lennon, to answer the response to this question. Thank you.
Morning. Yes, the consultation that we have with the conservation officer deals with the requirements that are needed in order to maintain the building, and that's certainly the timescales that we have been provided with in the past. I think there are some detailing issues with the coping stones, and the water ingress that we get as a result from that up at higher level tends to mean that the lime wash needs to get done on a more regular basis. But the full V-Vendor, it does get done on about a 10-year basis. It's the actual lime washing itself that needs to be done on a 2-yearly basis, rather than the whole lot needing to be redone. But we do have ongoing issues with water ingress, and the weather conditions that are needed to do the lime washing on the layering, one layer after another. They need to have a really good dry spell in order to get the lime wash to take properly, and for us not to encounter difficulties going forward. I don't know if that fully answers it.
Councillor Stewart, are you happy with that?
Yeah, just to say, it was specifically about the frequency of lime washing that I asked somebody about. So, well, thanks for the answer.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Convener. You know, in our housing reports, we're always talking about how we've had this increase in the need for 1 and 2 bedroom properties, and that's an increasing statistic within our housing model. And obviously, this is a property that provides that type of accommodation, but nobody wants to stay there. That seems to be the balance of where we're at. Now, my question is, I know, within the area of Cooper Angus, how many people do we have on our waiting list for these 1 or 2 bedroom type properties? Do we have any building of houses in the local area currently within the building plan? And is there houses within the Cooper Angus area? You know, we mentioned it in the community partnership paper earlier on. Cooper Angus being targeted for work. Is there stuff within our SHIP for our current housing within the area that we need to improve the current sort of housing stock within Cooper Angus? That's a bit of a 3-pronged question, but I'm sure you'll manage.
Thank you, Councillor. Claire.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor McEwen, and I think I will hand over to Elaine to answer the detail of some of the points that you've raised. But before I do so, I think you raise a good point there in terms of our strategic priority in terms of increasing affordable housing across the whole area. This is not a decision that we would take lightly, and it is only on very, very rare occasions such as this where we identify ineffective stock, and I think, you know, fully consider, I think, the best use of public resources and indeed our tenants' monies, and that includes land and property in such a decision as this, and then suggesting that we obviously reinvest into either regeneration or indeed new builds. So yes, absolutely. You raise a good point. Elaine will give you an overview in terms of the detail of your other questions, demand and indeed future plans in the area.
So in terms of demand, there is demand for housing in Cooper Angus, but as outlined in the committee report, there's no demand for these particular properties. At present, we've got 55 applicants who require 1 bedroom accommodation in Cooper Angus. And despite that, whilst we allocate accommodation based on housing need of the applicant, we also have to have regard to their specific examples, such as their preference in terms of accommodation type and where they want to be considered in terms of areas of development. In terms of our SHIP programme, we've potentially got 40 affordable houses for Cooper Angus in the programme for in the couple forwarding years, and we would also focus our buyback programme in areas where we do have those high pressures. So yes, we do have affordable housing within our programme for Cooper Angus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I know Councillor Waters wants to come in with a question. If I may just slip in a quick one here. We were talking about 55 people looking for properties. Could you just expand on the incentives that we've offered for these properties? Elaine, if you could.
Sorry, problems with my microphone button. Is it on?
We're on, yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of the incentives, we've offered white goods, we've offered financial assistance with removals, enhanced decoration, and we've also looked at enhanced improvements within the actual properties because they're very dark in terms of light. So we've done quite a lot of that. We've met with projects, services and local businesses as well, looking at a local lettings plan. So we've done quite a lot of work. We've had a detailed action plan in terms of how to create demand for potential tenants, but unfortunately, just given the size, there was nothing we could do in terms of making the properties larger and also making the properties brighter, despite putting additional lights and whatnot. That was the feedback in terms of the refusal reasons.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. Just has any consideration been given to actually sell these flats off separately, and if yes, what's the pros and the cons over doing that or not doing it, either at this initial stage or potentially if it doesn't sell at auction, potentially looking at doing that as the second stage. Thank you.
Claire, one for you, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and I think you raise a good point there. I think in the first instance we would be seeking to sell them collectively. because what we would want to avoid is a situation whereby we've maybe got mixed tenure and then all of the joint responsibilities with some owners and us owning some of the properties. So certainly it would be a far more favourable offer or option for us to sell them all off collectively.
Thank you.
And would it be a consideration if it failed to sell at auction initially?
I think it might be a consideration. I think if we fail to sell the building, then we will obviously need to go back and give some consideration to it for all of the reasons that we've just outlined in terms of the repairing responsibilities and those challenges. As you know, when we have got mixed tenure properties whereby we've got a blend of council and indeed owner occupied properties, we often have real challenges in terms of encouraging owners to pay for their share of the works. And given the significant and ongoing level of investment within this particular building, I think we would have concerns about the kind of the affordability and the ability of owners to work with us to undertake that. But it's not as if that's off the table. So I would say yes, let's see how we get on in the first instance in terms of selling the building off collectively. It might be something that we will need to go back to and fully consider in more detail going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lang, did you want to come back with any other questions? Because nobody else now coming through.
Thank you, Convener. Another question I had was, it was stated, that we'd spoken to tenants and no tenants had any concerns. Tenants where? Which tenants? If there's no tenants in the building, obviously it couldn't be them that we consulted. So I was just wondering who the tenants were that we consulted.
Claire, you come back on.
Yeah, I think Michelle has indicated that she'll give an overview. Michelle led on the tenant consultation exercise, so she'll be able to respond to this question in more detail.
Okay, Michelle, I'll ask you to come in.
Thank you, and thanks, Councillor, for the question. We have an agreed disposal framework, which we agreed with our tenants on how we would consult and engage with them over disposals. So in terms of the disposal at Cooper Angus, that disposal went out to all tenants who lived in Cooper Angus. So that's the agreement that we have with our tenants, as well as individual letters to those tenants. We also had a wider article in the spring edition of the On the House magazine as well. So that is a magazine that is received by all 7,600 tenants. And just to confirm, yes, there were no concerns raised about this particular disposal.
Okay, I can understand that, because tenants, if you're in a 2 or 3 bedroomed council property, you're not going to be concerned if we're looking to sell off 1 bedroom flats. Did we consult the 55 people who are on the waiting list?
Just to come back, because in terms of the Scottish Government guidance, in terms of disposals and the agreed framework we have with tenants, there's only a statutory obligation on the council to engage with tenants because it's an asset of the HRA. We do a different approach when it comes to rent setting, but rent setting levels impact on our future tenants. So we do on that occasion send out to applicants who are under offer. But in terms and in accordance with the guidance issued by the Scottish Government, it is only tenants who are on the HRA that we consult and engage with.
I can understand that statutory, but in this case, I was asking specifically, did we consult with the 55 people who are on the waiting list in Cooper Angus and ask them what their view was?
No, we didn't consult with applicants who were on the waiting list, although I'm assuming, and I'll hand over to Elaine in relation to this, that, at some point in time they will have been considered for these properties and for one reason and another been ruled out, but I'll hand over to Elaine in relation to that.
Yes, that's right, Michelle. All 55 have been offered the properties at Cumberland Barracks and all refused.
But they weren't consulted about disposing it from the council's portfolio?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions coming through, so I'll proceed to move the report. And I have actually been to the property myself, and I would concur with the comments made in the paper. It is dark and it is small, and the windows are not of normal size. So, in simple terms, the housing service provides affordable housing to people who need it, and to do so, we need a stock of housing. It goes without saying, then, that the decision to dispose of a property such as this one is not taken lightly. From another viewpoint, our service can function because of the rental income we receive from our tenants. As such, we have a duty to ensure that these funds are used for the maximum benefit of all. Occasionally, such as this, commercial realisation comes to the fore, and we must make a judgment on that basis. The property has failed to be fully rented since April 2020, so is not realising its rental potential of £19,000 per annum. But as the paper reports, because of the listed status, it still demands expenditure on maintenance, and this will include future improvements to energy efficiency. In essence, tenants' rents are funding what is an ever likely looking dead asset. Measures have been taken to encourage the take-up of the properties, as reported, but to no avail. We know from the previous paper, with rising costs and demands on those funds, that we are not able to allow this thing to continue indefinitely. Based on the district valuer's assessment indicating a value of £256,000, it is proposed to place the property in auction with a reserve of minimum of 75%. That is £192,000. It is recommended then that Housing Communities Committee approve the proposed disposal by auction of properties 1 to 5 Cumberland Barracks on the terms and conditions contained within this report, and on any other terms and conditions considered appropriate by the Executive Director Communities and the Head of Legal Services. And 2, subject to approval of the Housing and Communities Committee today, as 3.2 refers, the Property Subcommittee is asked to approve the proposed disposal by auction on the terms and conditions contained within this report, and on any other terms and conditions considered appropriate by the Executive Director Communities and Head of Legal Services. And number 3, should the property fail to sell at auction, it should be remarketed for sale through the traditional manner or at auction in compliance with the disposal of land by local authorities Scotland regulations and the relevant property's market value. And the relevant property's market value, and otherwise on terms to the satisfaction of the Executive Director Communities and the Head of Legal Services. Vice Convener, could I ask you if you would second the report?
Yep, I'm just happy to formally second the report.
Thank you. And I noticed at the moment, Councillor McEwen, I have an A in there, which I presume means you're going to put an amendment forward.
I do, and I think that Adam has that you could put up. We'll be able to see. It's really an addition to your paper. It's a point 4, in which that I'm suggesting that the revenue raised from the sale of this property would be reinvested in upgrade of the social housing stock in Cooper Angus, with the aim of reducing fuel poverty for our tenants, or providing modern social housing for affordable rent in the Cooper Angus area where it is most needed. You know, I think the Jacobites might have liked this house not to exist post the 1745, but I think the ability to mention that sort of highlights the historic nature of this building in itself. You know, how many buildings in our communities do we have from that time frame? I think this is an important building within the centre of Cooper Angus. I think it's one that now does look very good, and I think I would like to say that on this property onto the private sector, the local councillors and local residents will be, I'm sure, keeping a very owl-like eye on the state of the property and what goes on there to ensure the enforcement of any rules and regulations that are either legal or other come forward with or adhered to. I don't think for this property anybody's going to get away with anything untoward for any length of time. So that's my proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder for that, please?
Yes, I'm happy to formally second the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll open up now for comments. Do we have any comments, please? Councillor Lang.
Sorry, Convener, apologies just to interject.
Yep.
Just on a procedural point, Councillor McEwen, in relation to your proposed amendment, I know that you send this to us in advance so that we could send it on the screen. We did actually email back that we've discussed this with colleagues both in communities and legal services and finance, and there are actually some issues around competency of the proposed amendment. I wonder, convener, if we could suggest a short recess to have a discussion with Councillor McHugh and Councillor Waters, around those issues in more detail.
I'm happy for that. Do you want to? How long would you like? 10 minutes, or is that?
I think 10 minutes would probably suffice. Yeah.
Fine. Okay, we'll have 10-minute recess then. Thank you. Apologies to everyone. We appear to be still waiting to see whether the amendment is competent. They're still discussing at the moment, so we'll come back as soon as we possibly can.
Convener, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave after this paper as well.
I quite understand, Councillor. Thank you for your attendance this morning anyway.
Well, thanks for having me. I think it's only about the second time being in housing the community, so yeah, I've enjoyed it, and I have to say you convened the meeting very well. So
that is very kind of you. That's very kind of you.
Unusual praise from myself. But,
okay, I hope this has been recorded. That's all I care.
Well, praise where it's due.
But thank you for your attendance anyway.
I will stay and comment and wait till the end of the paper, Convener.
Fine. Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank everybody for their patience. We're still waiting for the amendment to be for a decision on the amendment, whether it's competent or not. We'll start again as soon as possible. Apologies, members. I've had a note come through saying the competency is still being discussed at the moment. We'll get back as soon as we possibly can.
Convener, if I could raise a point of order, it's my understanding that on matters of competence, it's the convener who rules on such issues. Given the inordinate amount of time it's taking to decide whether this is competent, then it clearly isn't, and that we shouldn't delay the proceeds of the meeting.
I think we're getting to that point, Councillor Barrett, and it may well be I have to make a ruling on this, but I'm going to send a message back to see where we are, because you're quite right, it's now dragging on a bit. I can see Councillor McEwen back in. I'm not sure. I can't. I'm waiting for something from Scott. I've got nothing from Scott at the moment. Are we clear to proceed?
Apologies, convener. That should now be everyone coming back into the meeting. So a suggestion is to go to Councillor McEwen, who I believe wishes to reconfirm his amendment.
You ready, convener?
I'm ready. Yes, whenever you are.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much to the full committee for your time on this. The legal and others decided that there's aspects of this, although well intentioned in our wording of our amendment to this, it's because it's monies and revenue and capital, then the wording of it needed to be accurate. And thank you very much for your time on this. I will post in the chat what the very short amended amendment is to add item 4 to this paper that will then go to property sub. And obviously, convener, if you wish to adopt this into your paper, you may wish to.
Could I ask, do we have a seconder for this? Is Councillor Waters happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that, convener.
Thank you very much. Now I'll open it up now to comment, if I may.
Thank you, convener. I think you'll see I was the first to comment further back the
Yes,
chat.
it's jumped all over the place again. But yes, go ahead, Councillor Lang.
First, a point of clarification, maybe from Scott or any of the officers here. Quite a few of us that are sitting on this committee today are also members of the property subcommittee, where this will be coming forward to be discussed. I just want clarification that I and nobody else is bound by the decision of this committee, or even by sitting on it, and they're in no way contradicting themselves if they take a contrary view when it's looked at property sub before I decide my course of action if this comes to a vote.
Scott, would you like to answer that one? I think that's the...
Yeah, convener, happy to clarify. Yeah, in relation to Councillor Lane's question, there's sort of two separate decisions today. The decision that's taken by Housing Communities will be the reflective of today's committee's view, and then it will be a decision for property subcommittee to take account of that view of the Housing and Communities Committee. But elected members that sit on both committees will be discharging different functions today and when it comes to the property subcommittee. So whatever decision is taken today by today's committee, it will then be afresh for the members of property subcommittee to look at that decision when they are coming to their decision.
Thank you very much for that, Scott. My comment is that I have issues with it, quite a few issues with this paper as it's presented. I'm not so confident as Councillor McEwen is about our ability to enforce the upkeep of the building, and we saw what happened with St Paul's. We didn't manage to enforce that. Cooper Angus, anybody knows it, has quite a few buildings that are in desperate need of repair. By the time this goes through all the committees and is put out to auction, will be more than a year into the 2-year cycle of as stated in the paper, where it has to be the exterior of the building has to be attended to. So whoever if anyone purchases this building will be faced with that within a year of the purchase, and then we've to enforce that. I don't think we can afford another building going into disrepair in any shape or form in Cooper Angus, and it is quite an imposing building there. So that's my one concern. I don't see how, I don't know why we're going straight to auction with this property. For the property subcommittee, it would have been, if we put it out on the market, we could then see there'd be a recommended purchaser. So it seems strange. Normally we would put it on the market, the property sub can then see who is willing to take the building over, and then we can guess what purpose that's for. But in this case, we're not doing that. We're going to auction, and if it doesn't reach a price in auction, then we're going to the open market, which seems a bit of a strange way to do things. Because I would like to have had an idea of who was wishing to purchase this building and what use it was going to be for. Because if we can't make it as a private let situation worthwhile. I can't see how anybody else can, because if we can't get, I can't see them getting higher price. So I'm concerned with the way that we're doing this. I can understand the reasons why we're doing it, but I don't understand the way we're taking this forward. So it was just to raise my concerns, and that's my comment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barrett, you've got a comment in.
Yeah, I was a point of clarification. I was seeking convener, and that the question is, if we don't pass the amendment put forward by Councillor McEwen, will the council use the capital receipt from the sale of the property to reinvest in modern housing for affordable rent where it is most needed in any case?
I would think that's the principle, but I'll ask Claire. Could I ask for clarification on that?
Yes, we will. You can see that as the recommendation within the report.
Right. So we've spent 20 minutes coming up with a completely unnecessary amendment.
Thank you for your comment. I noticed.
Thanks for your patience, Peter. Much represented, considering how long you talk at committees.
Gentlemen, we'll keep that as it is. I don't expand any further on that. I noticed there's a question here.
I'm sorry, Convener, I'd asked Councillor McEwen to withdraw that remark. That's completely unacceptable.
I thought your mark to begin with is unacceptable as well, Mr. Barrett.
I think, gentlemen, you just keep it as it is. I'm not going to have this argument going on in this committee this morning. You've said what you've said. That's it. But I think really that should be withdrawn, Councillor McEwen. It was a personal comment.
If that's seen as a personal comment, that was not intended, and it was only a rebuttal of the comment aimed at myself. But I will withdraw that comment if that is the proper process of the committee.
And, I think it's best if it's both. I don't. Councillor Barrett, would you withdraw as well? Your comment.
Convener, I've had confirmation that the amendment serves no purpose.
Okay. Fine. Okay. Can I clarify with Scott? If the amendment has no purpose, is there any point in having it?
Convener, I'm not quite sure in relation to Councillor Peter Barrett's comment if that's advice he's had from officers, but that's not something I've been involved with.
I'm just going by what Claire was saying, that the point of the sale is already in the paper. That's where the money's going to go. Can I just re-clarify that with Claire again, please? If she's coming back in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see within the report, it's proposed that the council dispose of the building with the 6 properties to enable the sum from the sale to be invested within the new build programme or regeneration within the area. That's what the report states quite clearly in section 1.6.
Convener, Councillor McEwen's upset by the fact that I alleged we'd wasted 20 minutes, and I'm happy to withdraw that comment.
Fine. Okay. Now I come back to Councillor McEwen. If this is already in the report, is it necessary to have the amendment?
I think it is, Convener. I think that I think it brings a bit of clarity. I think there's always detail within the reports that we have, and actually what people focus on is the points at the end of the actual paper, what we actually vote on and take forward to property sub. And yes, you could argue for us being on the committee and for people like Councillor Barrett, who used to be the convener of the committee, that he would understand these things are a given, but I'm not sure the populace of Cooper Angus understand that as a given. And I think having it there may state the obvious to us, but I think what it does is highlight to the community that the capital asset here, that the monies for it will be something that's not lost and something that is reinvested for where it's needed within the council.
Fine. Okay, then as we stand, I'm happy to incorporate. Sorry, yes, Barbara, come in.
I mean, the amendment is to add a recommendation for clarity because that recommendation, while it may be contained within the report, it isn't contained within the recommendations, and that's why you know, sort of, I think that Councillor McEwen and Councillor Waters have brought that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm happy then to incorporate that into the motion. If members are happy with that, I'm happy to move that. Councillor Hearn, are you happy to second that, with including that that section into the motion?
On the basis of what Barbara Renton just said, yes.
Fine. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to the next paper. And we're now on item 8, which is the annual report on the multi-agency.
Convener, sorry, as previously intimated, I have to leave now, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Thank you for your
Goodbye
presence
to
today.
the other members of the committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move on now to paper 8. This is the annual report on the multi-agency public protection arrangements. I'll ask Jackie Pepper to introduce.
Thank you very much, Convener. Members will be aware that multi-agency public protection arrangements, normally referred to as MAPA, are overseen by a Tayside-wide strategic oversight group, and that's led by an independent chair, Alan Small, and supported by a coordinator working across the 3 local authorities to deliver that locally, supported by Elaine Osborne as coordinator. And these arrangements are key to securing public safety in our communities. This report by the Tayside Strategic Oversight Group for the period 2020 to 21 describes how MAPA has operated effectively throughout the challenges of the COVID pandemic, and how improvements have continued to be taken forward at a strategic level, with some more qualitative information within the annual report. MAPA arrangements are also closely tied into our local public protection groups in Perth and Kinross, and partnerships continue to be strong in this particular area. Members will see in this report that there's been a very slight increase in the number of offenders being managed via MAPA in Perth and Kinross during the year, and rolling forward into October 21 that has continued to increase by a further 5, with no single identifiable reason contributing to this. Nevertheless, the management of offenders under MAPA continues to and has remained effective in Perth and Kinross. And happy to take any questions, and I know we're joined by Elaine Osborne, who is the MAPA coordinator for Tayside. Nicola Rogerson, as you know, is Sefferds manager for the Criminal Justice Service, and Eleanor Lindsay is also present as the Community Justice Partnership coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll open up to questions. I have one already. Councillor Hearn, Vice Convener.
Thank you very much, Convener. Yeah, I'm looking at the report, and obviously this was during the pandemic, and there were 3 individual paragraphs, one for Dundee City, Perth and Kinross, and for Angus, and it would appear that there was different varying success in terms of using technology in order to maintain the meetings with individuals. Dundee, it would appear from there, tended to move to just keep majority face-to-face, whereas Perth and Kinross and Angus took a different approach to use technology for a lot of their meetings. Perth and Kinross, reading through, tended to be successful, whereas Angus tended to have a problem and saw an increase in CPO breaches, license and conditions being breached. My 2-part question is, did we see an increase the same as Angus in terms of breaches? And is there any thoughts about keeping any of the technology moving forward?
Is that Jackie would like to answer?
Yeah, I'll start and then hand over to Elaine and perhaps Nicola. Elaine to answer the Tayside element to this, and Nicola more locally. I think it's fair to say, Councillor Hearn, that yes, we continue to keep some of the virtual mechanisms in use, particularly at a strategic level. So, for example, the strategic oversight group will continue to meet on Teams, and some of our MAPA review meetings and risk management meetings, which involve all of the agencies, are continuing to be held via Teams. So that mechanism is proving very useful to ensure that continued partnership and contribution of all the partners. That seems to be particularly successful. I think it's probably helpful for Elaine to come in and talk about the variation, as you suggest, in terms of success across Tayside, and Nicola to give a little bit of a flavour from a Perth and Kinross perspective.
Elaine, would you like to come in?
Hello, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, we saw a slight increase in breaches across actually all 3 local authorities, but every client was seen either face-to-face or with technology. Nobody was missed throughout this period. It has been a period of change for us, for MAPA, and as Jackie said, we will continue to use the technology for our MAPA meetings. We're finding that we're getting better attendance because of that, because no travelling has been needed by anybody to come to the meetings. And as I say, all 3 areas, we're actually getting about the same, they're about levelling off. So we're not seeing a spike at all in one area for breaches throughout this pandemic.
Thank you. And Nicola, would you like to add anything?
No, I think I would actually just like to echo what Jackie and what Elaine have said. One thing I will say, whilst technology has been very welcome in relation to conducting the meetings, and as Elaine has said, we have had very good attendance, I think there is still value in face-to-face contact with offenders, and I think we will do more of that. We had to obviously curtail that during the pandemic and use technology for that purpose, but we will be moving more towards that again with our more low-risk offenders in the future.
Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you. I have no more questions coming through this paper at the moment, so I will proceed to move it. This paper presents us with the latest annual report for the Tayside Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangements, MAPA. The report evidences the work being carried out under difficult restraints imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Wherever possible, technology through Microsoft Teams was utilised to maintain contact with MAPA offenders, and this has proved effective enough to be continued for future use. However, in certain circumstances where face-to-face contact was deemed necessary, appropriate PPE was used. In effect, contact was maintained in order to maintain public safety, although, as the report highlights, it is not possible to eliminate all risk. As of March 2021, Perth and Kinross saw 120 Level 1 offenders, 4 Level 2 offenders, and there were no Level 3 offenders. The report details the excellent work being done under a new independent chair, more so when recognising the difficult challenges during the period. It is recommended that the committee notes and endorses the Tayside MAPA Annual Report 2020-21 and requests that the Executive Director, Education and Children's Services brings forward future annual reports to committee. Could I ask you to second, Vice Convener?
Yes, thank you very much, Convener. Yes, I'm happy to second this report, and I think it does highlight the success we've had right across the Tayside region in terms of managing MAPA in such hard conditions, bearing in mind that I would say that most of the, if not all of the offenders in these categories require face-to-face meetings, and I think it's been a huge challenge, and I think the use of technology has helped, and we'll get back to some normality, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'll now open up to any comments. And I have Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much, Convener. Multi-agency work must have been the most difficult thing during COVID, and I think that's obvious in the papers and from your comments and from your Vice Convener's comments. And I just want to add my pushing my weight behind the support we have for all the agencies involved in this work. This is very difficult work at the best of times, and I think they've done a brilliant thing under the circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, I just wanted to add my thanks as a senior police officer. I've sat on the MAPA arrangements in my day, and I know how important a role this is for our communities and how intensely the use of resources can be in maintaining this kind of service. So I just want to congratulate the MAPA team for maintaining the level of service that they did through quite a challenging year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And there's no more comments. We will move the paper. Thank you. So we now move on to the last item this morning, paper 9, which is the Justice Update Report, and it's back to Jackie Pepper to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'm pleased to introduce the Justice Update Report for 2021, the year 2020 to 21. And this report provides an overview of the work of council services as well as partners in meeting national community justice outcomes. It brings details of the effectiveness of the supervision of offenders to Housing and Communities Committee. The accompanying report itself was submitted to the Community Justice Scotland in October 21, and it follows a standard format used for this purpose nationally. It highlights continued good progress against the Perth and Kinross Community Justice Outcome Improvement Plan. Perth and Kinross Community Justice Partnership has sought approval to prepare a one-year interim report and to carry out a strategic needs and strengths assessment, and for the Community Justice Outcome Improvement Plan to be prepared for the beginning of 22-23. A number of very positive examples are highlighted in this report, and to name a few, we have the one-stop women's learning service known as OWLS, Evolve, which is a new men's service building on the success of OWLS, which has continued to develop despite COVID challenges and supported by budget motion monies. West Bank and the work of the unpaid work team, the diversion from prosecution and bail supervision and right track structured diverse sentencing for 16 to 26-year-olds, and the expansion of the Caledonian system into the work of the team at Castle Huntly and the early release of prisoners and the multi-agency support that was given to support that complex work. So I'm pleased that I'm joined this morning, or it's now this afternoon, by Nicola Rogerson and Eleanor Lindsay, and Eleanor, who is the new Community Justice Partnership Coordinator and author of this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I'll open up to questions. I'm not seeing any come through at the moment, but we'll just give it a couple of moments. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. On page 212 of the pack, under section 4 challenges, there's reference to the difficulties in engaging with local sheriffs and having a meaningful dialogue with them over sentencing decisions. This seems to be a perennial issue, and I wonder how the officers were intending to take this forward, or how the convener was intending to take this forward, so that when we get the same report next year, we're not saying that there's still difficulties engaging with sheriffs and hoping that something that can be done about it. Do we need to bring it to the attention to the Minister of Justice? Do we need to bring it to the attention of the Sheriff Principal, or how can we actually move this along?
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Jackie, yep.
I think in some way the last year the last year and a half has been particularly difficult, and we had mentioned previously about partnership working, and I know that there are regular meetings with the Sheriff Principal which perhaps have not taken place over the last year and a half as they might. But it's certainly something that we remain committed to re-engaging in those discussions. And I'll ask Nicola to say a little bit about that. Nicola?
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, you're absolutely right. Those meetings with the Sheriff Principal have not taken place. we normally have regular meetings with the local sheriffs as well. Unfortunately, due to the situation last year, those meetings didn't take place either. However, we have re-established those meetings, and we do intend to re-establish that dialogue with our local sheriffs. I understand there's also been a change in the local judiciary, so we are hopeful that this will be an opportunity to be able to take forward some of the things which have been outstanding, and as you mentioned, Councillor Barrett, were obviously prevalent in the previous report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you. I notice I had two questions, but actually Peter's just asked the first one. No joined up thinking in this house. On pages 197 onwards, there's a lack of impacts in the report. And that's just a general comment. But my question is on page 192 or 38 of the report, just to ask what steps are being taken to provide support to those who are leaving custody to ensure that they are getting registered with a GP and having a benefits eligibility check.
Jackie, would you like to come in?
I think it's probably better Nicola answers that question, Convener.
Okay, Nicola.
Thank you. For those that are on a statutory order, that would be part of somebody's. That would be part of the work that would be undertaken by Criminal Justice Social Work in relation to short-term prisoners and those that are coming out from being on remand. We are currently in discussions with a third sector organisation to look at what supports can be put in place. Equally, as people may remember, there used to be the through care support officers. Unfortunately, due to redirection of certain Scottish Prison Service resources, those posts or those roles no longer exist. However, they have been put into abeyance, and we do hope that they will return in the future, as they were very valuable in helping support people coming out of custody. So as I say, we are in discussions or about to start discussions with a third sector organisation, and we're hopeful that those issues, as noted in the annual report, will be addressed.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you to you and Eleanor and the team for the report and all your work. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any further questions come through. On that basis, I will proceed to move. So, if I may, members, this paper presents us with the Perth and Kinross Community Justice Partnership Annual Return for the year 2020-2021, and which was submitted to Community Justice Scotland in October 2021. The annual return shows ongoing good progress against the Outcomes Improvement Plan and details work carried out with the One Stop Women's Learning Service, the West Bank Project and the Caledonian System, to name a few. No matter what can be said, it is the comments quoted in the report from all sides which speak for themselves, and it is here that the success can be seen. Of note this year, following on from the success of ours, a similar project for men was researched and created and looks to incorporate the theory and research into desistance, that is abstaining from crime for those serial offenders, which includes the impact of trauma on men who offend. This fledgling service and an early task for the men involved was to decide upon a name, and that name has now been decided as Evolve. It is early days, but the feedback to date is positive. The aim of all parties to work together to reduce reoffending and to support those who have committed offences, and in doing so, this contributes to making our communities safer places to live in. The recommendation is that the committee approves the approach being taken by Perth and Kinross in respect of the Perth and Kinross Community Justice Partnership and notes the content of the 2020-2021 Justice Update and the CGS Annual Return. May I ask if we can have someone to second that, please?
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Duff here.
Councillor Duff, yep.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think the paper highlights lots of good work which has been undertaken by the Council and our community justice partners during what was the first 12 months of the COVID pandemic, and I'm sure it was a very steep learning curve for everyone involved. This is a comprehensive report, and it provides many examples of the innovation and collaboration developed across community justice to ensure effective interventions were in place. I'm impressed by the range and positivity of these examples. For instance, the value of something as simple as a motivational message sent by text, and by the community and client group benefits provided by the works undertaken through the various projects. So my thanks to all of the organisations and partners involved in the criminal justice sector for all they have achieved during a very challenging year, and to the officers for bringing this report this afternoon. Thank you. I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll open up now to any comments. And I'm not seeing any comments coming through. So members, the paper's moved, and that brings us to the end of this committee meeting. It has been interesting this time and different, and a little bit longer than perhaps we had expected it to be. I am always keen to allow people to have a chance to debate, and if they wish to put amendments in, to do so. And I know that plays on the patience of the committee, but as I say, I'm keen to be fair to all people. However, as a personal comment, perhaps it might be that if members do intend to have amendments through, that they put them through a little bit earlier for officers to judge whether they are competent or not, to avoid playing on the time of this committee. That's a personal comment, but I would thank you all, as always, for your attendance and for your contribution, and of course my thanks to all the officers for their contribution and their help this morning, and of course their patience. Thank you very much. I believe our next committee is in March this year, and no doubt we'll see you then. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Convener.